The story begins with the Claire Phaeton gazed into the mirror, her reflection offering a stark reminder of the inadequacy she felt defined her existence compared to her radiant older sister. She scrutinized her own features, internalized the harsh criticisms that branded her as the princess lacking in charm, charisma, and the ladylike education expected of royalty. Her identity had been forged in the shadow of books rather than ballrooms, leaving her with the conviction that she possessed neither beauty nor the ability to smile convincingly. This self-deprecating assessment accompanied her as she faced her destiny as the second princess of the Phaeton Empire, a title she wore with a heavy sense of displacement. The geopolitical landscape had shifted violently, reshaping her life's trajectory as the empire of Phaeton fell to the kingdom of Valatinir in a war of independence. A map depicted the stark reality of the conflict, labeling Valatinir the victor and Phaeton the loser, a shift in power that demanded restitution. Claire found herself designated as a living war reparation, a human item of compensation sent to the victorious nation to solidify a peace treaty. The logic was cold but undeniable. By receiving a blood relative from their former superior, Valatinir demonstrated both internally and externally that they now stood on equal footing with the empire. Claire understood her role as a sacrificial pawn, rationalizing that if hostilities resumed, she would serve as a convenient hostage against her homeland. This fate stood in stark contrast to the modest future she had envisioned for herself, one where she might have married a bureaucrat and found quiet work within the administration. Instead, she sat confined within a carriage traversing the border, her father's indifference to her potential death as a dropout princess weighing heavily on her mind. She exhaled a weary breath, accepting that her position was less that of a hostage and more akin to a disposable sacrifice. As the carriage rolled toward the victorious kingdom, she lamented the meager contents of her luggage, wishing she had prioritized books over dresses and jewelry. Her escort interrupted her reverie, announcing their arrival at the border and the necessity to transfer vehicles. Claire confessed her longing for reading material, revealing that she had memorized the contents of the books in her home country, a mental library necessitated by the strict regulations she now faced. The grim reality of the border control manifested as a strict prohibition. No books were permitted entry into the kingdom of Valatinir. She acknowledged the impossibility of her situation, stepping out of the carriage to face the unknown reception that awaited a relative of the enemy. To her utter bewilderment, the carriage door swung open to reveal a young man beaming with an unexpected warmth. Prince Aglia Valatinir, the crown prince of the nation, welcomed her with a smile that shattered her expectations of hostility. He confessed that his impatience had driven him to intercept her arrival personally, a gesture that left Claire flustered by his handsome demeanor and genuine enthusiasm. He invited her into his carriage, his casual dominance sweeping aside her confusion as she struggled to reconcile his kindness with her status as a hostage. Inside the carriage, Aglia introduced himself formally as the man who would become her husband, confirming with a casual yep that she was destined to be the crown princess, not merely the wife of a second prince. Claire stammered, unable to process the elevation of her status, while Aglia apologized for his tardiness, introducing himself as Aglia Valatinir. He studied her with a keen interest, noting her celebrity status in his country, while Claire grappled with the cognitive dissonance of being welcomed rather than reviled. She harbored a dark suspicion that the next breach of peace would result in her execution, yet Aglia's demeanor suggested a complexity she had not anticipated. Aglia addressed the elephant in the room, acknowledging the unspoken agreement that governed their arrangement. He framed their relationship not as captor and captive, but as an opportunity to extract information from one another, proposing they start by simply getting to know each other. He assured her that the journey to the castle would take a few days, urging her to take her time adjusting to her new reality. Claire, overwhelmed by his consideration, offered a hesitant thank you, her voice trailing off in uncertainty. As the journey progressed, the carriage halted in a city for a rest stop. Claire surveyed the streets, noting the abundance of general stores but the glaring absence of libraries or bookstores. She probed Aglia about the availability of paper through trade, only to uncover the strategic deprivation inflicted upon his kingdom. Aglia explained that Valatinir lacked a paper manufacturing system, forcing them to rely on parchment and wood shavings. He revealed that the empire had deliberately excluded paper and ink from traded goods, designating them as prohibited items to stifle the dissemination of knowledge and keep the kingdom underdeveloped. Claire instantly recognized the tactical suppression of information, but her gaze shifted to the dense coniferous forests that lined the road. She connected the dots, realizing the raw materials for paper production were abundant within the kingdom itself. Aglia confirmed he had inspected the local stores and surmised that the technology to convert their timber into paper was the missing link. Claire's demeanor shifted from timid to passionate as she declared her love for books and her desire to document the oral traditions of Valatinir once paper became widely available. Realizing she might have spoken out of turn, Claire hurriedly apologized for overstepping her bounds, but Aglia denied any offense. He pressed her, asking if she possessed the knowledge to construct the necessary equipment and draft plans for paper manufacturing. Claire confirmed her expertise, causing Aglia to embrace her in a burst of jubilant energy. He extolled her value, realizing that with her knowledge of logging and manufacturing, they could bypass the empire's embargo, boost literacy, and generate wealth for the royal court. He promised they would discuss the details at the castle, praising her as amazing while Claire blushed furiously at the sudden intimacy. The remainder of the journey blurred into a continuous conversation, with Aglia chatting incessantly while Claire showcased her knowledge of trade, grain, and Nezian silk. A lingering sense of social inadequacy plagued her as they dined, fearing her attitude compared unfavorably to her sister and that she was failing to stand up to a man properly. Yet, Aglia neither pouted nor expressed anger, his constant engagement suggesting he was the first person to truly look at her and listen. Their arrival at the castle marked a permanent transition, with Aglia declaring it her new country and home. Claire marveled at the lovely architecture but internally braced herself, convinced she was entering enemy territory where she would be a burden. She remained baffled by Aglia's pleasure in her company. Upon entering the grand foyer, a phalanx of servants bowed in unison, greeting them as Crown Prince and Crown Princess. Claire instinctively recoiled, asking if she wasn't supposed to be the hated woman from the enemy country. Aglia silenced her self-deprecation with a gentle, "I understand," signaling to the staff that she was overwhelmed and needed space. Aglia outlined the immediate schedule, granting her rest for the day before a banquet the following morning. He clarified they would occupy separate rooms until the wedding ceremony, a detail that flustered Claire as the reality of their marriage solidified. He escorted her to her chambers, where 3 handmaidens, Millie, Melissa, and Gwen, introduced themselves with warm smiles, eager to serve her. Aglia departed, instructing them to take care of her, leaving Claire to collapse onto a bed that felt impossibly soft. Lying in the comfort of her new room, she marveled at the politeness and care she had received, a stark contrast to the treatment she had endured in her own homeland. The morning sun heralded the day of the feast, and the maids descended upon Claire with cheerful efficiency. They selected a glamorous dress and applied bright cosmetics, showering her with compliments about her fair skin and figure. Claire stood frozen, unused to such praise, confessing she had never received so many compliments in her entire life. As they finished her preparations, she looked in the mirror, acknowledging that their efforts had improved her appearance despite her self-perceived bad posture. Turning to the maids, Claire thanked them individually by name, Melissa, Gwen, and Millie, expressing her gratitude and her desire for their continued care. The servants paused, touched and surprised that she had remembered their names from the previous day. Their dedication deepened, pledging to serve her with their whole hearts. Fortified by their support, Claire took a steadying breath, resolving to step forward and show her face to His Majesty the King and the gathered nobles, ready to begin her new life in this strange, welcoming land. The banquet hall erupts with an atmosphere of refined tension as the King of Valatinier, a man of imposing stature with a thick mustache and a crown resting upon his brow, addresses the newly arrived guest. He raises a champagne flute, the glass catching the light, and declares the commencement of a metaphorical battle between their nations. Across from him stands Claire, the second princess of the Phaeton Empire, her expression guarded and bead of sweat tracing her temple as she faces the ruler of what she considers an enemy country. The king's demeanor shifts instantly from regal intimidation to boisterous hospitality as he smiles broadly, thanking her for her presence. He lifts his glass high, calling for a toast to welcome Claire Dano, shattering the icy anticipation with a resounding cheer. Claire recoils slightly, her large eyes widening in sheer bewilderment at the sudden warmth. The king, noticing her confusion, addresses the elephant in the room regarding the previous night. He admits that offering greetings immediately after her long, exhausting journey would have been meaningless. He confesses to his own rudeness but suggests they dispense with formalities so she can sit and introduce herself properly. Claire, maintaining her royal composure despite the whiplash in tone, curtsies and apologizes for her own inability to greet him upon arrival. The king waves off her apology with a casual air, urging her to simply introduce herself. Regaining her footing, Claire attempts to restart the interaction formally. She confesses her lack of understanding regarding the enthusiastic welcome she has received, given her position. She introduces herself with dignity as Claire, the second princess of the Phaeton Empire. The response from the Valatinier court is immediate and overwhelming. The king and his assembly raise their glasses once more, shouting cheers to Crown Princess Claire, celebrating her arrival as if she were a returning hero rather than a political hostage. The narrative shifts to the underlying political reality as Claire contemplates her value. She acknowledges that she possesses what the kingdom of Valatinier desperately needs, knowledge. The king explains that while his country boasts independence, it suffers from a lack of reconstruction and future development. Their spies within the empire had long reported on Claire's intellectual prowess, marking her as a target not for her lineage, but for the living knowledge contained within her mind. Claire touches her chest, understanding now that their hospitality stems from a pragmatic desire to utilize her education for their national advancement. She rationalizes the situation, accepting that she is viewed as a human encyclopedia. However, the king interjects, his expression sharpening with a playful yet dangerous edge. He reveals that there was intense passion regarding her acquisition. He bluntly states that if the emperor had handed over anything other than Claire herself, mere books or scrolls, he would have made things difficult enough to force a switch. He laughs, admitting that while the knowledge is vital, there is another reason he wanted her specifically. A young man with striking red hair, standing beside the king, interrupts the conversation, suggesting they discuss the details later, his gaze fixed intently on Claire. The scene dissolves into the festivities of the banquet. The king commands everyone to enjoy the food and merriment, initiating a feast. Guests engage in lively conversation, wine flows freely, and the atmosphere is one of genuine celebration. Claire moves through the crowd, engaging with various nobles, though she worries internally that her formal demeanor might be dampening the mood of the raucous party. The banquet stretches on, occupying the entire day from morning until night. Seeking a moment of respite from the overwhelming social engagement, Claire retreats to a quiet balcony overlooking the dark ocean. The silence is broken by the young man from earlier, who approaches her with a gentle demeanor. He asks if she had fun, to which she politely responds in the affirmative. The young man comments on his brother, noting that he has half abandoned his royal status to serve as a knight commander, declaring he will definitely take that role. Claire, confused by the lineage implications, queries if there isn't another prince in Valentinier, as she hasn't seen one around. The young man smiles enigmatically, assuring her that she will meet the other prince soon, and suggests that perhaps he even came all the way out there just to meet her. As he speaks, the wind picks up, and he steps closer to shield her, advising her not to let the night wind chill her. Claire looks up at him, and a sudden flash of recognition strikes her. She observes his flaming red hair and eyes that burn like the setting sun. The image superimposes over a memory buried deep within her past, triggering a realization. The narrative transports back 4 years to the royal palace of the Phaeton Empire. A younger, smaller Claire sneaks through the opulent corridors, relieved to have escaped the tedious ballroom dancing. She seeks a quiet place to read a book at her leisure. Peering around a massive pillar, she asks if anyone is there. Instead of solitude, she finds a young boy with red hair, crouching on the floor, tears streaming down his face. Claire, displaying her characteristic bluntness even then, asks him why he is crying and notes she hasn't seen him around before. She deduces from the delegation present that day that he must be the Prince of Valentinier. The young boy, wiping his eyes, confirms his identity. He explains that he accompanied his father to plead with the king of Phaeton for a doctor. A mysterious disease has spread through his country, causing suffering and death, and they lack the medical expertise to stop it. However, his father refuses to listen to him, and the empire treats their engineers and scholars as mere knowledge commodities rather than people worthy of aid. He feels powerless and ignored. Claire, dropping to her knees to be at eye level with him, shifts immediately into an analytical mode. She asks him to describe the disease. The boy describes the terrifying symptoms. People suddenly cannot breathe and die, while others develop severe rashes or respiratory issues specifically when they eat. He notes that the problem escalated when they released a large stock of old wheat onto the market because it yielded more than rice, and due to a poor fish catch, the population began consuming significantly more wheat than usual. Claire processes this information instantly. She identifies the cause not as a contagion, but as a severe allergic reaction caused by the sudden, excessive consumption of a single food source, wheat, over a short period in a population not accustomed to it. She realizes the unbalanced diet is the culprit. Without hesitation, she opens her book and begins scribbling furiously on a piece of loose paper. The young prince watches her, confused. Claire suddenly commands him to take off his clothes. The boy flushes crimson, stammering in shock, but Claire demands he hurry. She is not interested in impropriety, she needs a hiding spot. She shoves the paper containing the medical advice and tips on handling the illness into his clothing. She explains that while the guards will search his luggage, they will not strip search a foreign prince. She tells him the paper feels rough, but he must bear it, take it back to his country, and use the knowledge to save his people. Claire then grabs his shoulders, her expression stern and wise beyond her years. She tells him that crying solves nothing. She instructs him that if he wants to be happy, he must get stronger. The boy, overwhelmed by her fierce aid and directness, agrees, wiping his tears. She urges him to hurry back to His Majesty before his disappearance arouses suspicion. As he turns to leave, the boy stops. He looks back at Claire with a newfound intensity. He declares that when he becomes happy and strong, he wants her to come and marry him. Claire, somewhat dismissively, agrees that if he can be happy from the bottom of his heart, he can come pick her up. The timeline snaps back to the present on the moonlit balcony. The realization settles over Claire. This handsome young man is the crying boy from 4 years ago. The prince confirms it, smiling gently. He explains that he couldn't speak of this openly earlier because imperial spies were present in disguise. He reveals that thanks to the knowledge regarding allergies she provided, they took measures, secured rice as a food source, and saved his country from the crisis. Claire, flushing with embarrassment, apologizes. She admits she doesn't remember conversations with people very well and questions if she really said something as bold as a marriage promise. The prince laughs, noting that her current reaction is a defeat for her lady's education, but he finds it charming. He steps closer, closing the distance between them. He tells her that she saved him, not just his country. With the ocean breeze swirling around them, the prince gazes at her with deep affection. He confesses that she has been his inspiration his whole life. He reiterates his proposal from years ago, asking her formally to marry him. He declares that he has learned to be happy from the bottom of his heart and has become stronger, fulfilling the conditions she set. He explains that in Valentinir, there are people who see him not just for his knowledge or utility, but for him, a quality he felt was completely absent in his home country. He acknowledges that he has nothing to offer but his own knowledge, but he has found people who need it. He takes her hands, looking into her eyes with unwavering sincerity. He frames her arrival not as a political transaction, but as a fulfillment of destiny. He smiles, a genuine, warm expression that melts Claire's defenses. He accepts her status as a hostage, or sacrifice, with a twist of irony, stating it is a good thing she came as a sacrifice, implying that her presence is the greatest gift she could have given him. The following morning, sunlight streams into a lavish bedroom where Claire sits up in bed, looking disheveled and nursing a headache. A cheerful maid with twin tails, presumably Melissa, enters with a tray, offering medicine. She informs Claire that the doctor diagnosed her with overeating and overdrinking from the previous night's festivities. The maid chatters happily, explaining the banquet culture of Valentinir. She notes that when there is a big event, banquets often last from morning until night. She details how even the guards are served drinks in shifts and that servants and maids are given the week off to enjoy the festivals in the city. Claire, holding a warm cup of medicine, listens to the maid's explanation of the country's vibrant, celebratory culture. The maid explains that the people are excited about the festivals that occur twice a year. Claire realizes the stark difference between the rigid, transactional nature of the empire and the joyous, community-focused spirit of Valentinir. She sips her medicine, her expression softening. She resolves that starting tomorrow, she will be of service to everyone. She decides that even if she lacks the traditional graces of a lady, she will dedicate herself to her bridal training in this new land. Claire has found her place in a foreign country, no longer a tool of knowledge, but a person embraced by a prince and his people. The morning sun filters through the ornate windows of the royal chambers, illuminating a scene of gentle industry. Maids flutter about the room, their hands busy with the delicate task of preparing the crown princess for the day. One maid, adjusting the ribbons of the princess's dress, inquires softly about her health, asking how she is feeling after her recent indisposition. Claire stands poised and serene, a soft smile gracing her lips as she addresses her attendants. She beams at them, her expression radiating genuine warmth as she assures them that she has fully recovered, crediting their diligent care for her return to health. The atmosphere in the room shifts from caretaking to purposeful preparation. The head maid announces the next phase of the morning routine, declaring that it is time to ready Claire for her audience at His Majesty's office. Claire's expression firms, a look of determination settling in her eyes as she prepares to face the duties of her new station. Moments later, Claire stands before King Aglia. The king, seated comfortably, greets her with a disarming lack of pretension. He waves away her attempts at stiff formality, urging her to relax. He instructs her to view him not as a distant monarch, but simply as a father-in-law, and his wife as her mother-in-law, fostering a sense of familial intimacy within the cold palace walls. Claire, still adjusting to this unexpected warmth, offers a polite, albeit slightly stiff, greeting once again. Aglia wastes no time in pivoting to the business at hand. He calls out to his aide, asking for Claire's schedule to be brought forward. Claire watches him, noting his generous spirit, though she keeps her thoughts guarded. The king lays out a grand strategic vision for her integration into the kingdom's governance. He explains that she is to inspect all the government departments. Following this audit, she will be responsible for establishing an entirely new department. He emphasizes the gravity of this role, describing it as a key position vital to the country, designed to fill the missing pieces in the nation's administrative structure. Claire listens intently, absorbing the weight of the responsibility. However, a flicker of uncertainty crosses her face. She hesitantly voices a confusion that has been plaguing her, admitting that she had anticipated undergoing traditional bride training rather than administrative labor. She trails off, unsure of her footing. Aglia nods, acknowledging her query but swiftly redirecting the course of her education. He declares that he will leave full authority in her hands, trusting her judgment implicitly. To ensure she is well supported in understanding the country's specific affairs, he proposes bringing in Lord Balk to supplement her knowledge. He adds, with a thoughtful expression, that the Lord would make a fine escort for her endeavors. Claire's mind races to categorize this new figure. She asks for clarification, wondering if the Lord he refers to is a noble. Aglia confirms this, but his demeanor shifts into a teasing register. He looks at Claire, his eyes twinkling with mischief, and asks if she has any concerns about the arrangement. Claire, interpreting this as a critique of her social performance, begins to list her insecurities. She worries about her etiquette, her conversational wit, and the nuances of her body language, fearing she falls short of the court's standards. Aglia interrupts her self-critique with a backhanded compliment that catches her off guard. He praises her as a wonderful woman but then slyly asks if she truly feels the need to work on her feminine qualities. The comment hangs in the air, causing Claire to freeze. She processes the gentle jab, resigning herself to the reality of the situation. She bows her head slightly, accepting her fate, and confirms she will proceed according to the schedule. Suddenly, the king's expression darkens, the playfulness vanishing in an instant. He leans forward, his gaze intense and serious. He issues a sharp, unexpected warning. Claire must not, under any circumstances, cheat on him with Lord Balk. Claire recoils, her eyes widening in sheer shock. The accusation is so absurd, so far removed from her reality, that she is momentarily struck dumb. She flails her hands in a frantic denial, stammering out a rapid-fire defense. She insists that she would never cheat, and furthermore, she deprecatingly argues that she is not the type of person Lord Balk would be attracted to in the first place. Aglia watches her panic, then clarifies his statement with a nonchalant observation. He notes that Balk is merely very good at his job, implying the warning was perhaps more about professional intimacy than romantic entanglement. Attempting to regain her composure, Claire steers the conversation toward the mysterious Lord Balk. She wonders aloud what kind of man he is. She speculates that perhaps she shares similarities with him. Aglia quickly dispels this notion. He describes Balk as unsociable and uncompromising, a man of rigid principles. He then leans in with a conspiratorial whisper, asking Claire to keep his candid assessment a secret. Claire departs the king's office and makes her way to Lord Balk's domain. She arrives at a heavy wooden door, bracing herself for the encounter. Upon entering, she is greeted not by a person, but by a landscape of paper. Stacks of documents tower like skyscrapers, covering every available surface. A voice calls out from behind the fortress of parchment, instructing her to enter. Lord Balk sits amidst the chaos, a man of sharp features and serious demeanor. He wears a monocle that catches the light as he looks up from his work. Claire greets him formally, addressing him as Lord Balk. Internally, she steels herself, resolving not to let her guard down before this unsociable man. She introduces herself as Claire, expressing her anticipation of working with him. Balk rises, offering a stiff but polite apology for not greeting her sooner. He introduces himself formally as Balk of Count Parton. Without wasting time on pleasantries, he gestures for her to follow, announcing that he will take her to the place where the civil servants work. As they walk, Claire thinks to herself that despite his reputation, she might get along with him better than expected. They traverse the corridors, Balk explaining the logistics of the administration. He informs her that the civilian workrooms are divided by department, resulting in a labyrinth of offices. Claire listens, her mind already turning to the mechanics of governance. She expresses a desire to observe the actual work processes, recalling her observations from her home country where she saw no issues with the workflow. Balk inquires if she has knowledge of the local tax system. Claire demonstrates her astuteness, reciting the history of the country's financial controls. She notes that when the country was a vassal state, the flow of money was strictly controlled to prevent unnatural movements. She explains how the kingdom of Valatinir used to appropriate tax revenues and financial books. Balk confirms her knowledge with a simple yes. They arrive at the destination. Balk opens a door, announcing, "Here it is." The scene that greets them is one of absolute bedlam. The room is a disaster zone of disorganization. Papers are not merely stacked, they are strewn across the floor, piled precariously on desks, and spilling off shelves. A staff member, overwhelmed by a towering stack of documents, loses his balance and crashes into the mess with a loud thud. Balk, seemingly desensitized to the chaos, attempts to continue his briefing. He begins to explain the role of a domestic manager, stating that their work concerns the country and depends on the nature of the business and the culture of the state. However, his academic explanation is drowned out by the reality before them. Claire watches, horrified, as civil servants shout across the room, trying to locate vital documents. One official yells, asking whether he should prioritize rewriting the headcount list or compiling trading revenues. Another apologizes frantically, admitting a report is still incomplete. A voice cuts through the din, asking if anyone has seen the tax revenue chart for the year. Claire's patience snaps. The disparity between Balk's orderly description and the anarchic reality is too great. She recalls Balk mentioning separate rooms for each department. Yet, looking around, she sees no separation. Administration, trade, and customs documents are jumbled together in a single, heaving mass. The shelves are overflowing and the workflow is non-existent. She steps forward, her voice ringing out with authority. She commands the room to stop working immediately. The chaotic bustling halts. Every head turns toward the crown princess. The staff stare at her, their faces blank with confusion and shock. Even Balk looks surprised by her sudden outburst. Claire does not waver. She issues a decree that stuns the room. Normal work is banned for 1 month. She declares that it is impossible to perform their duties properly in such conditions. She orders them to create a list of any missing items. Furthermore, she instructs that all materials must be grouped by year and date immediately. The civil servants look terrified, sweating nervously as they process the order to halt their frantic pace. They glance at Lord Balk, seeking guidance. Balk, however, is not angry. A small, rare smile plays on his lips as he watches Claire take command. He nods to his subordinates, instructing them to do exactly what the crown princess has said. Having established order in the first room, Claire turns to Balk and requests that he show her to the next department. Balk agrees readily. The inspection continues throughout the day. They move from office to office, witnessing similar scenes. Claire feels a lingering anxiety, suspecting that Balk's earlier smile was one of amusement at her expense. She worries he finds her amusing rather than competent. By the time evening falls, exhaustion hangs heavy over both of them. Balk checks the time, noting that dinner will be served shortly. He advises Claire to get some rest. Claire thanks him for his hard work, her body sagging with fatigue. Alone with her thoughts, Claire reflects on the day's events. She realizes that despite her fears, the civilian officials seemed to listen to her. She analyzes the root cause of the chaos she witnessed. Her mind settles on a critical logistical failure, the lack of paper. She reasons that nothing beats paper for transcribing and documenting materials. She formulates a goal, to have the necessary papers ready in a month, coinciding with the time the officials will finish sorting their files. Her thoughts drift to Lord Balk. She re-evaluates him, deciding that while he may be unsociable, he is also emotional and friendly in his own way. Later, Claire and Balk confer again. Claire presents a bold plan to address the resource shortage. She brings up the topic of Synapse, the country across the water. She asks Balk if he knows what it is famous for. Before he can answer, she explains that it is known as the land of craftsmen. Balk listens intently. Claire elaborates, explaining that Synapse produces the high-quality paper essential for the drawings and designs used in their crafting and decorating processes. She highlights a socio-economic opportunity. Many artisans in Synapse have been left out of the workforce. She proposes that they leverage this. She points out that their own country currently exports wood to Synapse. She suggests they stop merely exporting raw resources. Instead, she argues they should purchase the machinery, import an entire workshop, and hire the unemployed technicians from Synapse. She suggests offering them temporary benefits and salaries to establish domestic mass production of paper. Balk is visibly impressed. He immediately grasps the strategic value of her proposal. He agrees without hesitation, stating he will send a letter immediately. Claire presses on, emphasizing that stationery is the most basic and important tool for governance. She suggests they also hire logging companies to reduce imports further and switch entirely to national consumption. Balk watches her, his admiration growing. He listens as she seamlessly pivots to budget management. She discusses managing the budgets for these new initiatives and estimating the expenditure for each department. Balk notes with surprise that she is already familiar with all the departments. He realizes the magnitude of her contribution. He looks at her, his stern face softening. He calls her presence a godsend and describes her as too convenient personnel. He bows his head slightly, thanking her profusely for her help. Then he makes a stunning offer. He announces that he would like to create a new department called the General Affairs Department, and he wants Claire to be in charge of it. Claire is taken aback by the offer and the intensity of his gratitude. She notices he looks genuinely happy, which confuses her. She wonders if she is doing something wrong. Balk, sensing her hesitation, asks why she is so desperate to help. He points out the irony. She is in a country that was once a vassal state, a country that defeated her own homeland. He calls her a strange one. Claire's expression becomes solemn. She closes her eyes, accessing a deep well of resolve. She admits that when she married Highness Aglia, she considered herself a hostage. She confesses she came prepared to die. She opens her eyes, looking directly at Balk. She explains that despite her expectations, the people here have been welcoming to her. Because of that warmth, her perspective has shifted. She declares that this is now her country. She vows to do everything she can and to serve them with all her heart. Bulk meets her gaze. The cynicism vanishes from his eyes. He tells her that he understands very well that she is telling the truth. The heavy moment is broken by the practicalities of the day. Bulk notes it is almost 7 o'clock. He expresses his desire to have good relations with her moving forward. Suddenly, Claire realizes the time and the breach of protocol. She panics, apologizing profusely. She bids him farewell, promising to see him tomorrow, and scampers away down the hallway. Bulk watches her retreating figure, the strange princess who has already begun to reshape his world. He hums thoughtfully to himself, alone in the hallway. The afternoon light filtered softly into the drawing room, illuminating the intricate patterns of the porcelain tea set resting on the table, where a young man with disheveled dark hair and piercing eyes leaned forward, his chin resting upon his interlaced fingers as he scrutinized the young woman across from him. He observed the subtle signs of fatigue etched onto her delicate features, breaking the silence to remark with gentle concern that Claire looked incredibly tired. Claire, whose mind had been drifting far away into deep contemplation, jolted slightly at the sudden address, her eyes widening in a mix of surprise and confusion as she stammered a hesitant acknowledgement. The atmosphere in the room carried the weight of recent events, heavily influenced by the context of a hostage princess who had unexpectedly been welcomed as a brilliant intellect in an enemy nation. Claire's internal thoughts churned with anxiety, her memory flashing back to the bustling activity of the government department she had recently appended. She recalled the murmurs of dissatisfaction among the staff, acutely aware that being bossed around by a newcomer, a little girl no less, must have felt humiliating for the established officials. She lowered her gaze, confessing to the prince that she knew her actions were selfish, yet her voice trailed off as she sought reassurance regarding the anger of His Majesty and His Highness. She hurriedly explained that her drastic reorganization was a spur-of-the-moment decision, driven by a desperate desire to avoid halting the entire department for a month just to shuffle personnel. Prince Aglia, maintaining his relaxed posture, offered a soft laugh that dispelled the tension in the air. He assured her with absolute conviction that both his father and he possessed unwavering confidence in her abilities. He framed the upheaval not as a disturbance, but as a necessary opportunity, drawing a parallel to a post-war process where systems must be dismantled to be improved, suggesting that just like a nation recovering from conflict, their department needed significant changes to evolve. Despite his reassuring words, a shadow of insecurity loomed over Claire. The visual representation of her inner psyche darkened as the terrifying possibility of failure whispered in her mind. She acknowledged her own lack of practical experience, viewing herself as merely a head case, filled with theoretical knowledge but untested in the gritty reality of administration. The stakes felt monumentally high, for she feared that a single misstep would cost her this sanctuary, a place that had strangely become more comfortable than her own homeland, and that the faith placed in her would evaporate, leaving her isolated once more. Sensing the spiral of her dark thoughts, Aglia abruptly shifted the conversation, his attention drifting to the beverage steaming in the cup before him. He lifted his gaze, commenting on the pleasant scent wafting from the liquid, noting with a connoisseur's curiosity that the aroma was distinct from the coffee he knew. He struggled to pinpoint the fragrance, describing it as a blend of milk and honey, while reminiscing that in the Vietnam Empire, tea was strictly categorized as either oolong or green, leaving this new sensory experience a mystery to him. He took a tentative sip, his expression one of genuine intrigue as he questioned if the beverage was truly tea at all. Claire, grateful for the distraction, engaged in the culinary explanation, thanking him for the food and noting that the warm drink was specifically prepared to help rest a weary mind. She clarified that the drink was called black tea, derived from the exact same plant as the green tea he was familiar with, but differentiated by the manufacturing process which allowed the leaves to ferment, resulting in a richer, more complex fragrance. Aglia admitted he had never encountered such a delightful aroma, confessing that in the Empire, the art of brewing such tea had been lost to time, remaining only as descriptions within ancient books. He emphasized its utility for fatigue, encouraging her to drink. Claire lifted the cup, the liquid warm against her lips, and found herself surprised by the flavor. Contrary to her expectation of bitterness, the taste was smooth and deeply delicious. She drank eagerly, the soothing warmth spreading through her, and realized with a start that her cup was already empty. She turned to Aglia, her eyes sparkling with renewed energy, and confirmed the drink's deliciousness. Aglia, observing the color return to her cheeks, smiled knowingly, revealing that his digression into tea trivia had been a calculated maneuver to pull her mind away from her heavy anxieties. He chuckled softly, his demeanor shifting into a playful teasing as he noted the milk content justified the name milk tea, but then he leaned in closer, his gaze fixing on her face. He called her name softly, complimenting her cuteness before pointing out that she had a bit of chestnut cream stuck on her cheek. Before Claire could react or reach for a napkin, Aglia closed the distance and, with a casual intimacy that sent shockwaves through the room, licked the cream directly from her face. He pulled back with a satisfied smirk, remarking on the sweetness, while Claire erupted into a flustered panic, her face burning red as she shrieked at him. Unfazed by her outburst, Aglia playfully demanded she not cheat on him, to which the overwhelming embarrassment forced Claire to retort that she would never do such a thing and thus wouldn't even know how. The scene concluded with Aglia encouraging her to do her best tomorrow, leaving Claire flustered but undeniably energized by the interaction. The narrative shifted abruptly from the intimacy of the drawing room to the cold, hard logistics of governance and industry. A report was being delivered regarding delinquent taxes, specifically concerning official documents detailing unpaid levies on land and property. Lord Balk, a tall man with long, sleek hair and glasses, outlined the situation regarding the Kingdom of Synapse, a region teeming with paper mills that had fallen behind on their tax obligations. This financial failure provided a strategic opening. The administration moved to secure the machinery and technicians from these failing mills, offering to cover their debts, relocation costs, advance wages, and housing guarantees in exchange for their relocation to Valatinir. This aggressive recruitment strategy aimed to centralize paper production under their control. Flashbacks revealed the execution of this industrial maneuver, showing Claire and Lord Balk standing at a bustling port city, watching the influx of resources. Claire, positioned as the mastermind, observed the crates of machinery and the flow of craftsmen arriving by ship, taking charge of deciding exactly where these new assets would be deployed. The ease of duplicating documents through these new letterpress workshops was identified as a critical advantage for organizing official forms, a massive leap forward in bureaucratic efficiency. Claire and Balk discussed the newfound independence of their nation. No longer a vassal of the empire, they anticipated a surge in traffic and people entering from other kingdoms, necessitating a new level of spatial organization. The conversation turned to the creation of a comprehensive map, a task requiring a specific type of individual possessing an innate sense of direction, knowledge of topography, and familiarity with the kingdom's roads and villages. Claire reasoned that merchants, who frequently traveled between kingdoms and managed transportation, would be the ideal candidates for this mapping endeavor. However, she acknowledged the difficulty in recruiting them, as merchants were notoriously cautious, trained to protect their cargo and money, and often reluctant to work directly for the state unless the incentives were overwhelming. Balk noted that unless they offered something truly lucrative, producing a great deal of profit, negotiations would stall. Claire, struck by realization, proposed a bold economic concession. She suggested forming a dedicated mapping department but outsourcing the actual operations to the Chamber of Commerce. The bargaining chip would be a state-sanctioned monopoly. The merchants would be granted the exclusive rights to sell paper copies of the government-mandated maps, along with a monopoly on the distribution of paper and ink throughout the country, excluding only the national market. Balk, adjusting his glasses, immediately understood the value of this proposition, noting that merchants involved in post-war trade knew better than anyone the immense value of paper and ink. Furthermore, the guarantee of working with the government ensured they would be paid on time, removing a common risk for private traders. 3 days later, this strategy was put to the test in a high-stakes meeting with representatives from the Chambers of Commerce. Lord Balk stood at the head of the long table, his imposing figure and confident voice dominating the room as he explained the mapping department and the lucrative concessions on offer. Claire sat quietly to the side, painfully aware of her own lack of negotiation skills, feeling terrible and relying entirely on Balk to guide the proceedings. She had admitted earlier that she was merely a reader, not a talker, and felt embarrassed by her inability to lead the discussion, though Balk had lamented that her engagement to the Lord prevented him from using her talents more directly. The result was a resounding success. Balk's calm demeanor overwhelmed the merchants, and the 7 chambers of commerce in attendance agreed to cooperate on creating and updating the maps in exchange for the concessions. Claire, observing the victory from the sidelines, stood as tall as she could, serving as the silent authority behind the deal. She expressed immense relief to Balk afterwards, admitting that had she been the one speaking, she would have been fidgety and flustered, grateful that his presence had secured the cooperation they needed. With the external logistics settled, the focus shifted to the internal reorganization of the government departments. Returning to the privacy of her quarters, the physical toll of Claire's relentless work became visible. She stared into a hand mirror, dismayed to find dark circles forming under her eyes, realizing she had been driving herself too hard. Her maid, Millie, immediately stepped in with professional cheerfulness, asking Claire to leave the matter to her. With deft hands and a brush, Millie applied makeup, expertly concealing the signs of fatigue and choosing a shade that highlighted Claire's face. Claire looked at the result with awe, praising Millie's amazing skill as the dark circles vanished from sight. However, Millie's tone turned serious as she warned Claire that while the makeup could hide the exhaustion for now, it was vital that she not push herself to the breaking point, promising to prepare chamomile tea to ensure she slept well. Freshly composed, Claire proceeded to brief the team on the near completion of the department reorganization. She outlined the new structure with precision, The General Affairs Department would serve as the central hub, managing headcount lists, land allocations, and distributing necessary materials to all other offices. The Tax Department would calculate taxes based on these rosters and land data. The Finance Department would prepare quarterly budgets and allocate surplus funds to the needy. The Administration Department would handle detailed records of Treasury funds and compile petitions. Claire explained that the General Affairs Department would also act as a check against fraud, preventing document forgery by strictly managing paper and ink inventories and overseeing the disposal of miswritten documents. She expressed confidence that with Lord Balk and his trusted staff running this central department, the system would stabilize, requiring only minor adjustments based on future feedback. As the day wound down, Aglia praised Claire for her hard work and invited her to dinner. He noted that while she had done as much as possible in a month, the work was never truly done. He suggested they share a cup of tea after the meal, though he claimed he didn't work nights, a statement that seemed to carry a double meaning. Later, Claire found herself sinking into a bath, the water offering a momentary escape from the pressures of the court. Her thoughts turned inward, acknowledging her status as an outsider. She knew that many people were unhappy with her presence and her sudden, sweeping changes to the regime. She suspected that Aglia, his father, and Lord Balk were shielding her from the harshest criticisms, venting their frustrations in places where she couldn't hear them to protect her feelings. She resolved not to ask about it or dwell on it, maintaining a stoic facade to survive. Exiting the bath and preparing for bed, Claire bid the maids good night, her demeanor calm despite the internal turmoil. The maids fussed over her, urging her to drink her tea before it got cold and worrying about her skin suffering from late nights. Left alone with her tea, Claire's reflection was somber. She admitted to herself that the lack of sleep was causing eye bags, but rationalized the stress as a normal part of starting something new. She told herself she was used to being badmouthed and that she was doing her part to move the kingdom forward. She thought of His Highness Aglia as kind and hardworking, yet a persistent, unshakable feeling of insecurity gnawed at her. She couldn't understand why this dread lingered despite her logical defenses. The source of her dread was revealed in a shocking twist occurring elsewhere in the palace. A letter had arrived from the Empire, causing panic among the royals. The king, flustered, read the missive which declared that since the marriage ceremony had not been concluded, the Empire now deemed the second princess, Claire, to be defective. The letter chillingly requested that she be exchanged for the third princess. Aglia stood reading the document, his face darkening with realization. He understood immediately that this was not a simple diplomatic request, but a reaction to Claire's brilliance. He realized that the imperial spies within the country had reported on Claire's innovations, her introduction of papermaking, letterpress printing, and administrative reform. The Empire, specifically her father, had assessed her capabilities and concluded that she was too dangerous to be left in the hands of a rival nation. Aglia concluded, with a grim expression, that Claire had been too conspicuous, and now her very competence had placed a target on her back. Dark memories of a past life surged through Claire's mind, echoing with the cruel, dismissive voice of a father who never saw her worth. The spectral voice taunts her, reminding her that she was married off to a man simply because she lacked the grace of a lady, a disposal of a useless asset intended to meet its end in a foreign land. The narrative of her existence within the Phaeton Empire was written in cold indifference. They cared nothing for her intellect or the vast studies she had consumed. In that stifling world, a woman's value was tethered solely to her aesthetic appeal, her ability to stand ornamentally beside a man, and her capacity to serve as a sufficient accessory to male power. This internal reflection swirls within Claire, a storm of quiet confusion and simmering anger, as she confronts a letter sent from that very homeland. The context of this sudden communication becomes clear as she processes the shift in her father's perspective. He has reassessed her, determining that her unique abilities are no longer trash, but rather useful and dangerous to have on hand. The Empire has evolved, drowning in a rapid increase of paperwork and technological innovations, creating a bureaucratic labyrinth that now demands the very intellect they once scorned, prompting her father to demand her return. The King of Valentinier reads the ultimatum aloud, his voice heavy with the gravity of the threat, a formal request for the exchange of the second princess with the third princess. He questions the audacity of the Empire, wondering if they cannot simply allow a new wind to blow through his country, permitting it to grow and develop without their meddling interference. The scene shifts to a tense confrontation involving the king, Prince Aglia, and Claire. Claire grapples with a darkening thought, wondering if this crisis would have been averted had she simply remained in her homeland, resigning herself to a miserable existence where scorn was her daily bread. She questions if accepting the request is the path of least resistance. However, Prince Aglia cuts through her self-doubt with fierce possessiveness, declaring unequivocally that he wants no one but Claire. The king, holding the parchment with a trembling grip, elucidates the Empire's pretext for this demand. They claim an insult and unfair treatment of their imperial princess. The ultimatum is stark and carries a brutal timeline. Within 1 month, if Valentinier does not comply with the request or provide a just explanation, the empire will be forced to wage war. The king reveals there is a continuation to the letter, his face contorted with frustration and regret. He laments his past decisions, cursing under his breath and wondering if he should have married Claire to Aglia first, even if only for appearances, to solidify her position. The shock of the situation reverberates through the room, leaving Aglia and Claire stunned. Despite the looming threat, Aglia turns to Claire with a reassuring smile, prioritizing her emotional state over the geopolitical crisis. He affirms that Claire is a benefactor of their country, a living person with knowledge, and he refuses to subject her to a heartless wedding or hand her over like a bargaining chip. Claire, however, burdens herself with the weight of the conflict, believing it to be her fault and resolving not to let war break out between the two nations on her account. She analyzes the strategic reality with cold logic. Valentinier currently lacks the strength to fight another war. She recalls that the kingdom won the previous conflict only because it capitalized on the Phaeton Empire's exhaustion from invading other countries. The king sits in his chambers, the weight of the crown heavy on his brow, while Aglia stands protectively near Claire. Claire's demeanor shifts from guilt to determination. She declares that she could never forgive a return to the status of a dependent state, used as a pawn by the empire. With a steely gaze, she requests a mere 3 days from the king. She promises to formulate a counter-strategy within that short window. Claire retreats to the solitude of a balcony, the night air wrapping around the stone structures of the castle. She forces her mind to work, discarding prudish hesitation in favor of ruthless calculation. She assesses their leverage. What can they throw at the empire, and what retaliation would they receive from her father? She coaches herself to think, to anticipate every possible pattern of engagement. She notes that the departments within Valentinier are being reorganized and are beginning to run normally, and with the presence of Sir Bulk, their security is robust. Her internal resolve hardens as she stares out into the darkness. She acknowledges that she has proven to be nothing more than a danger to the empire in their eyes. She decides firmly that she has no intention of returning to people who place no value on her life. Instead, she chooses to walk alongside the people of Valentinier who need her, and specifically with His Highness Aglia. The grim reality of a return to the empire plays out in her mind. At best, she would face house arrest, at worst, execution. She reiterates her distaste for war and her refusal to be the catalyst for bloodshed. 3 days pass, and the scene returns to the king's chambers. The atmosphere is thick with anticipation. The king, looking weary but attentive, asks if any good ideas have come to mind. Claire sits beside Aglia, who looks on with concern. She drops a bombshell of a proposal, stating calmly that she intends to hold herself hostage. The absurdity and boldness of the statement shock the king and Aglia, eliciting confused exclamations. Claire instructs them to reply to the empire with this specific threat. The king is baffled, stammering as he tries to process the logic behind her words. Aglia immediately objects, claiming that such a feat is impossible. However, Claire counters with the true extent of her power. She reveals that she holds within her mind the contents of all the books and documents that ever existed in the imperial palace. She asserts that her plan is not impossible. She dictates the terms of the reply. In the event of the exchange, Claire of the Phaeton Empire, will take a look at the annual budget proposal, including the number of troops, farming, trade, and the number of each private army in the nobles' register, and inform all your vassals in detail and return. The king realizes the magnitude of her leverage. She is truly a person with living knowledge. He stammers, understanding the devastation such an information leak would cause. Claire confirms his fears with a dark serenity, acknowledging that if she were to execute this threat, there is no doubt it would be a catastrophic blow to the empire. She admits it is a direct threat. She accepts the terrifying consequence. Her life will be in grave danger within the empire if she returns. She urges the king to send this reply. With a chilling resolve, she explains that she entered her marriage expecting to die, and so she intends to make the most of her life now, regardless of the risk. The king, impressed and convinced by her resolve, agrees to the plan. He declares that Claire's safety is synonymous with the safety of the country. He issues immediate orders to increase her security detail, ensuring thoroughly that she is safe from poisoning, and commands the immediate house arrest of any suspected spies. In a private moment, the facade of invincibility slips. Claire clutches her chest, confessing to Aglia that the truth is she is very scared. Yet she affirms that she has made up her mind. Aglia, moved by her bravery and vulnerability, gazes at her with deep affection and determination. He vows to protect her in any way that he can. Claire reflects on the change in her life. She now has people who protect her and has been given a place where she truly belongs. The narrative jumps forward to the aftermath of the letter. The strategy proves effective. Aglia notes that his father-in-law is quick to cut his losses, a trait he expected. The king of Valentinier reveals that the emperor received the threatening letter and responded immediately. The empire's response is a complete capitulation. We withdraw our request and would like to arrange a meeting to personally apologize. The king sighs, noting that they must accept the meeting since a peace treaty exists between the nations. However, the victory is laced with suspicion. The king discusses the results, noting that refusing the meeting could be interpreted as a sign of willingness to start a war. The meeting is scheduled for 1 month's time at the royal palace in Valentinier. Aglia remains cynical, predicting that while they say they are sorry, they will likely bring along 500 soldiers under the guise of an escort. Claire, looking somber, worries about the king's position and the immense pressure this places on him. The king reassures her, explaining his own tactical response. He mobilized his people and army, choosing to fight. He responded to the letter with a strict condition. The country is secure, so only 10 men can escort you beyond the border. He acknowledges that Valentinier has been a vassal state for a long time, a fact Claire's father knows well. Aglia and Claire share a quiet tea time, the weight of the past surfacing. Aglia admits that he took up his sword because war is a sad thing. Claire, trembling slightly, validates his choice, stating it is unfair not to fight when one has to. Aglia probes gently, asking if she hates him for that decision. He observes that she would never have thought of going independent on her own. He laments that if only there had been medical help from the Empire during the previous conflict, things might have been different. Claire affirms his feelings with a simple, yeah. Claire looks at Aglia with gratitude, her eyes shimmering. She tells him that she is prepared for the meeting, as it would be strange if she were not present. Aglia confesses a desire to hide her away to keep her safe. Claire touches his face gently, listing the reasons she cherishes him. He is someone who is kind to her, someone who appreciates her, someone who fought for her ability to laugh, and someone who came for her. She admits she has misgivings, but if she is with Highness Aglia, she feels secure. In a whisper of intimacy, she expresses her desire to get married. Aglia, flustered and blushing, playfully retorts that it's impossible to believe she doesn't like him. The scene shifts to the practicalities of defense. Aglia reassures Claire, and then turns to the maids standing nearby. He confirms that all the maids assigned to Claire are, in fact, trained escorts identified for the peace treaty. The maids, appearing innocent in their frilly uniforms, suddenly reveal hidden knives and weaponry with cheerful smiles. Claire is taken aback by this revelation. Aglia adds that his younger brother will also be there to protect her. Aglia warns Claire sternly that she must never act alone. The conversation takes a light-hearted turn as Aglia demands she not cheat on him, to which Claire vehemently responds that she won't. Then, the younger brother makes his entrance. He strikes a dramatic pose, introducing himself as Julius, firstborn of the kingdom of Valentinier. He declares it an honor to meet the hero of our country, the person with living knowledge. Claire is dazzled by the sheer amount of sparkles emanating from his charismatic presence. Julius is immediately scolded by Sir Bulk for pointing his finger, and he apologizes profusely. Aglia tells Julius to calm down, warning that his behavior might give the wrong impression. Julius abruptly shifts the topic, asking his brother why he isn't getting married yet. The narrative outlines the full security detail. Claire will be guarded at all times by 5 men, 3 ladies-in-waiting who handle dark weapons, and the current knight, His Highness Julius. Additionally, Lord Bulk, a former knight who taught swordsmanship to Aglia, is present as an ostensible bodyguard. The group gathers to discuss the strategy for the upcoming meeting. The king warns that while the Empire claims to be coming for an apology, they will definitely try to take Claire's life if there is an opening. He notes that spies are under house arrest, but vigilance is paramount. Suddenly, a comedic flashback interrupts the serious tone. Julius exclaims that he will not put the person who saved his life in danger. The life-saving event is revealed to be Claire saving him from a wheat allergy, depicted with chibi characters where Claire prevents him from eating bread. Aglia brings the focus back to the present, stating there is one more thing to take care of: how to set him up. Claire, puzzled, asks what he means by set up. Aglia points at her. Claire smiles, stating she thinks it is a good idea. Aglia finds the concept interesting. Then, with a serene and terrifying smile, Claire announces her role in the setup: I'm going to drink poison. The room erupts in shock. Aglia yells, H. He immediately rejects the plan, shouting that if poison is involved, he will drink it himself. The king and others protest, telling Claire she cannot do that and not to be too hasty. Aglia looks at her with intense worry, declaring he is against it. He refuses to accept a plan where there is even an unlikely chance that she lies down and doesn't come back. A young girl nearby also expresses her disapproval. The king, stroking his mustache, looks unimpressed and concerned. However, Claire remains resolute. She asserts that with her knowledge, the second princess confronts her father, the king. She declares she is going to take advantage of herself to the fullest. She claims to know exactly what she needs to do to prevent any permanent harm from happening. She dismisses Aglia's concern by stating she can't help in battle anyway, implying this risky gambit is her battlefield. The chapter ends with the tension of this suicidal strategy hanging in the air. The king of Valatinir, holding a posture of regal defiance, initiates the confrontation by declaring that preparations should commence. His gaze, sharp and unyielding, locks onto the man opposite him, the Emperor of Phaetonum, as he formally abdicates the battlefield of physical combat, instead challenging the visiting monarch to a battle of diplomacy and intellect, referring to it as a war of words. The atmosphere in the room thickens with the weight of unsaid threats, the tension palpable as the king hints that the visiting delegation, ostensibly there for peace, is composed largely of combat-ready personnel, a subtle accusation that the emperor is posturing for war. Elsewhere, in the quiet seclusion of her chambers, Claire, the second empress now married into the kingdom of Valatinir, prepares for a gamble that risks her very life. Her reflection in the mirror reveals a woman steeled against fear, even as her handmaiden stammers in terror, unable to comprehend Claire's willingness to consume poison voluntarily. Claire silences the girl's fears with cold logic, explaining that if she refuses the poison, the failure will cost the servants their livelihoods and escalate the incident into a political disaster that could reignite the war. She lifts a small vial, a secret concoction she describes as a neutralizer, a specialized compound designed to interact with the poison she anticipates and render it non-lethal. She meticulously verifies the mixture of the poison and its antidote, ensuring the chemistry will hold, before turning her attention to her maid, Melissa, Millie, requesting a private audience to discuss a final, critical instruction. The narrative shifts to the Grand Hall, where the diplomatic veneer barely conceals the hostility beneath. A month has passed since the initial tensions, and now the two countries have gathered for a formal meeting and dinner involving the delegation, Claire's father the Emperor, and the third Princess Lilia. The King of Valatinir stands before the assembly, his voice booming with performative gratitude as he presents Claire not as a hostage, but as a beloved wife to his son Aglia, a woman devoted to the service of her new country. He apologizes with a razor-thin veil of politeness for the lack of a grand ceremony, citing the post-war recovery as the reason for the modest festivities. The Emperor of Phaetonum listens, his expression unreadable, as the king subtly reprimands him for making unreasonable requests in the past. Beneath the surface of this gentle greeting lies a steel trap. The king's praise of Claire serves as a territorial claim, signaling that she belongs to Valatinir now and he will not surrender her, nor will he allow the empire to dispose of her to create a pretext for conflict. The subtext strikes with the force of a hammer. If Claire is deemed a threat by her father, Valatinir will protect her, and if Phaetonum seeks war, they will find a kingdom ready to defend its new princess. The king's ultimatum hangs in the air. If the emperor insists on hostilities, he will find no easy sacrifice here, suggesting that perhaps another princess should be offered if the emperor wishes to concede on other political fronts. Seated at the long banquet table, the dynamics of the royal families play out in silence. Claire sits flanked by powerful men, feeling the intensity of their gazes. To her side sits Prince Aglia, her husband, and opposite them sits Julius, while behind her stands Lord Bulk, creating a protective yet suffocating ring of male presence. Lilia, the third princess of Phaetonum, observes Claire with a gaze dripping with malice, noting that despite the handsomeness of the men present, Claire seems out of place. The emperor breaks his silence, addressing his daughter with a voice that feigns paternal concern but drips with condescension, noting that she appears to be doing what she is supposed to be doing. Claire responds with a practiced courtesy, welcoming the emperor and expressing her pleasure at seeing him in good health. Lilia, unable to contain her venom, leans in with a smirk, commenting on Claire's appearance. She observes that her sister has lost weight, suggesting with a cruel lilt that perhaps Claire is having trouble digesting her food. The implication is clear to everyone at the table. Lilia is mocking Claire's precarious position, hinting that her food might be tampered with. Lilia continues, expressing disappointed sarcasm that Claire is being replaced by someone the emperor despises, taunting her about the gaps in her perfect lady's education. Aglia, sitting beside Claire, stiffens as he deciphers the code behind Lilia's words. He realizes that the princess is explicitly signaling that the food is poisoned right now. Claire, refusing to be rattled, counters Lilia's insult with a disarming smile. She attributes her weight loss to the busy nature of her new life, moving around the palace and engaging in her duties. She emphatically denies any illness, complimenting the cuisine of Valatinir as delicious, a direct rebuttal to Lilia's suggestion that the food is inedible or dangerous. The tension snaps focus to the tea service. A maid approaches, the spout of a silver teapot tilting over a delicate porcelain cup. As the dark liquid streams into the cup, a fine powder is visibly sprinkled into the mix, dissolving instantly into the tea, a visual confirmation of the assassination attempt. The emperor watches the process, his eyes narrowing with satisfaction as he declares that this is a specialty tea from Phaetonum. He lifts his own cup, remarking that this is the first time he has ever been served good tea, a coded message that the deed is done. Claire stares at the cup before her. She knows the moment has arrived. To seize control of the narrative and prevent her father from claiming she was murdered by Valentinier negligence, she realizes she must drink the poison knowingly, relying on the neutralizer she took earlier. She lifts the cup, the aroma of the tea masking the lethal agent within. In her mind, she acknowledges that the Empire likely plans to dispose of Lilia as well eventually, but for now, Claire is the primary target. The Emperor stands, raising his glass in a toast that rings hollow with hypocrisy, dedicating the drink to the peace between the Empire of Phaetonum and the Kingdom of Valentinier. As the crystal glasses clink and the guests drink, Claire consumes the poison tea. The reaction is almost instantaneous. Her breath hitches, her hand flies to her mouth, and a convulsion racks her slender frame. Aglia, watching her like a hawk, screams her name as she pitches forward. The banquet hall erupts into chaos. Aglia catches her collapsing body, his face twisted in horror and rage. He shouts orders to the frozen servants, commanding them to get her into a room immediately. Amidst the confusion, a whisper circulates. The soup, or perhaps the tea, was poisoned. Aglia carries Claire in his arms, her body limp against his chest. Even in her fading consciousness, Claire's mind races with political calculus. She understands that her father attempted this assassination because it was his last opportunity to kill her on Valentinier's soil and blame it on them. She knows that if the Emperor discovers she has survived the lethal dose, he will be forced to visit her, trapping him in a scenario she has already scripted. She had previously briefed the King of Valentinier on this exact sequence of events, ensuring that the entire Valentinier court is aware she intended to drink the poison voluntarily. As her vision blurs, she whispers a plea to Aglia, begging him to come see her later, reinforcing their bond even as she slips into the darkness induced by the toxin. In the aftermath, the King of Valentinier confronts the Emperor in a corridor, the air frigid with accusation. The king suggests the poison could have been planted in the middle of the meal, dismantling the Emperor's potential deniability. He explains that due to the lingering grudges from the war, the palace kitchen takes extreme precautions to ensure no one is poisoned, implying that an internal breach by the Phaetonum delegation is the only logical explanation. The Emperor, realizing his ploy is unraveling, attempts to pivot, demanding the cancellation of the peace treaty item, a desperate move to salvage his political objective. The king dismisses this immediately, pointing out that this demand is no different from the unreasonable requests the Emperor made earlier. The King of Valentinier draws a hard line in the sand. He declares he will not leave his daughter-in-law in a dangerous environment, effectively taking custody of Claire's safety away from her father. He challenges the Emperor, asking if he is truly ready for the challenge that such a betrayal invites. He reveals that Claire knew her life was threatened by people within Valentinier, spies, yet she insisted on remaining in the palace, a testament to her loyalty that shames the Emperor's treachery. The king emphasizes that the marriage was intended to strengthen the peace between the two countries, and now the Emperor seeks to reverse that progress. He ruthlessly exposes the Emperor's hypocrisy. The Emperor knew Claire was walking into a trap, and the king knew the Emperor sent her as a sacrifice, yet the marriage proceeded. The king delivers the final blow to the Emperor's pride, asking if he still desires a war instead of offering the apology that is due. Later, the Emperor and Lilia stand outside Claire's recovery room. The Emperor, looking ragged and defeated, processes the king's defiance. A servant announces their arrival to the occupants of the room, stating that His Majesty the Emperor and Her Imperial Highness the Third Princess have come to visit. Inside, the scene they find destroys their expectations. Instead of a corpse, they find Claire reclining in bed, weak but undeniably alive. Aglia stands by her side, a sentinel of fury. The Emperor's face twists in shock as Claire greets him, assuring him she will get better soon. She reveals she drank medicine mixed with water, a cover story for her neutralizer, which saved her life. The Emperor, forcing a mask of concern, asks if she is okay, but the disappointment in his eyes is evident. Realizing the assassination has failed and the political leverage has evaporated, the Emperor abruptly announces they are leaving tomorrow morning. Before departing, he casts a look at Claire, muttering a cryptic instruction not to make her suffer, likely referring to Lilia or perhaps a feigned concern for Claire herself to save face. Once the door closes, the facade drops completely. Aglia, trembling with suppressed rage, turns to the corner of the room where the maids are cowering. He draws his sword, the metal singing as it clears the scabbard. He advances on the servants, his eyes burning with the need to punish the treachery that nearly stole his wife. He demands they let go of him as other guards try to restrain his lethal advance. He screams at his father, the king, questioning why they should show mercy. Claire intervenes, her voice cutting through Aglia's fury. She reveals the depth of her preparation. She explains that she had already washed all the intruders, meaning she had identified and purged the spies surrounding her long before this night. She clarifies that even those closest to her were scrutinized, so she could be fully prepared for this moment. She confirms that none of the spies she placed under house arrest were the potential perpetrators of the assassination. She had neutralized the threats in advance. She turns her gaze to Millie, the maid who served the tea. Claire explains that she intentionally left Millie and 2 others out of the purge because she deemed them the most trustworthy, or rather, the most useful for her plan. She had interrogated each lady-in-waiting individually to gauge their loyalties. Claire then drops the revelation. She knew the milk tea served by Millie was poisoned. She admits the timing was not exactly what she expected, but she was ready. She looks at Millie, who is weeping on the floor, and notes that Millie seemed surprised to see Claire alive, shocked that the poison she administered didn't work. Claire declares with absolute resolve that she has no intention of dying, nor will she allow herself to be killed by the pain and hatred of the people of this country. The narrative delves into Millie's tragic backstory to explain her betrayal. Millie was the only one of the maids who had lost her mother to a wheat allergy, likely a cover for a resource shortage or poisoning incident during the war, and her father to the combat itself. Millie had been manipulated into becoming an interloper by Claire's father, the Emperor, who exploited her family's old noble origins in Valatinir and the misfortunes that befell her relatives to turn her into a weapon. Claire reveals that she told no one about using the antidote, not even Aglia, to ensure the reaction was genuine. She looks down at the sobbing maid. Instead of condemning her to execution, Claire offers forgiveness. She apologizes for not being able to fix everything that broke Millie's life. But she firmly states she cannot let Millie die. She decrees that Millie will be sent back to her birthplace in Phaeton, sparing her from Valatinir justice. Claire's punishment for the spy is not death, but life. She wants Millie to watch as Claire changes this country, to survive and witness the transformation of the kingdom she hated enough to kill for. Aglia, still gripping his sword, struggles with this leniency. He argues that they cannot simply leave the country's security to spies who betrayed it. Claire counters gently, reminding Aglia that there are many people like Millie in his kingdom, people who lost family to the war or the tragedies associated with the wheat allergy famine. She insists that healing these wounds is more vital than vengeance. Aglia, moved by his wife's wisdom and mercy, finally relents, sheathing his anger. He agrees to her terms. Claire turns back to Millie, imploring her to move in the right direction. She expresses a hope that one day, these people will be glad that she, Claire, made a change to such a country. She dismisses the maid, telling her to have a good night's sleep, closing the chapter on the assassination attempt. The resolution of the political crisis is swift and decisive. The Emperor and Lilia are effectively confined to their quarters until morning, after which they are to return home immediately. Claire reflects that perhaps the worst-case scenario, total war, has been spared. She reveals she petitioned for the best possible accommodations for Millie's travel, ensuring the spy is treated with dignity rather than as a prisoner. Claire muses that under normal circumstances, a failed assassin like Millie would be executed and her birthplace demolished as punishment. However, Claire's mercy allows Millie to survive and see the future Claire is building. Claire admits to herself that this act of mercy might be selfish, a way to prove her own power to change fate. The broader political fallout is managed with equal finesse. The wheat allergy problem that plagued the region is settled not by swords, but by science and logistics. Valatinir sends doctors and druggists, provides medical books, and pays compensation to the affected areas in Phaeton. Claire orchestrates the narrative control, deciding that this solution will be published as a story in the next issue of the magazine, turning a crisis into propaganda for peace. The plotting of the Phaeton Empire is buried. To avoid the massive trouble that would arise if the assassination attempt were made public, the incident is spun. Instead of a story about a coup, it becomes a story about a minor stir in the royal court where Claire, through a desperate measure, escaped a personal plight. The final scene finds Claire exhausted but victorious. She expresses a simple, domestic desire to have a cup of tea with His Highness Aglia. This time, a cup she knows is safe. Her thoughts turn to her own recovery. She needs to rest and flush the remaining poison from her system. The sacrifice has survived, and in doing so, she has conquered not just her father's scheme, but the cycle of hatred that threatened to consume 2 kingdoms. The heavy haze of unconsciousness begins to lift, consciousness returning to Claire not as a sudden jolt, but as a slow, confused awakening. Her eyes flutter open, struggling to focus on the ceiling above her, her mind still reeling from the void of sleep. Beside her bed, a maid, Gwenna, reacts with explosive energy, her composure shattering the moment she notices her mistress stirring. Gwenna does not hesitate. She pivots instantly, shouting orders to herself and the empty air, declaring that she must summon the doctor and His Highness immediately. The maid's panic is palpable, a whirlwind of motion as she dashes out of the room, leaving the door wide open in her wake. Voices echo from the hallway, a chorus of relief and urgency. Someone cries out Claire's name with the force of a prayer answered. Another voice, trembling with emotion, sobs out their gladness. Claire, however, remains focused on the physical reality of her body. She speaks, her voice likely raspy from disuse, complaining that her back and hips feel as stiff as rocks after her prolonged immobility. A gentle pair of hands assists her, offering to help loosen her stiffened joints, urging her to sit up slowly. The narrator reflects on the gravity of the situation. This is Claire, the woman who saved Valentinier from a crisis by taking a stand, now beginning her recovery. Claire undertakes a clinical assessment of her own condition, flexing her fingers and taking deep, testing breaths. She confirms internally that the detoxification process was a success. She notes with a calm, analytical satisfaction that she has no difficulty breathing, and the numbness that once plagued her has completely vanished. She clenches her hand into a fist, testing her motor control, and finds that the movement is pain-free. Suddenly, the doorway fills with frantic figures. His Highness Aglia bursts in, his usual royal composure replaced by raw, unmasked anxiety. Behind him, the stoic Lord Bulk and a tearful maid, likely Aglia's attendant, watch with bated breath. Aglia rushes to the bedside, his eyes wide, sweat visible on his brow as he cries out her name. He brings his hands together, his voice dropping to a whisper of profound relief, admitting how truly glad he is to see her eyes open. The maid, Aglia, addresses her formally, tears streaming down her face. The room settles into a quieter, more intimate atmosphere. Aglia leans over Claire, his face close to hers, a soft blush coloring his cheeks as he gazes at her with undisguised affection. Claire learns that she has been asleep for approximately 3 days. She looks up at him, her expression softening, and announces simply that she has returned. Aglia, his eyes filled with warmth, welcomes her back, the phrase carrying the weight of a fear now extinguished. In the days that follow, life begins to return to a semblance of normalcy. Claire narrates her recovery process, noting that she was finally able to settle down and reunite with everyone. She sits in a chair, sipping soup provided by a maid, acknowledging that she needs to recover slowly over the next few days before she is fully ready to move again. A panel shows the king, Aglia, and maids surrounding her. The king looks particularly emotional, while maids embrace in the background. Other scenes depict Claire walking in the garden with her attendants, regaining her strength. Claire's mind, however, never truly stops working. She reflects that it is acceptable for them to rest for the time being. She considers the reparations and the political fallout, calculating that the medical assistance and knowledge provided, along with the reparations, should be sufficient compensation. She confirms with herself that the opposing party has agreed never to bother their country again. Her thoughts turn darker as she considers the fate of her father and Millie, asking with a chillingly sweet smile how they will be dealt with. The scene shifts to a gathering of the royal family and close aides. The king is weeping comically, shaking with relief and gratitude that Claire is safe. Aglia stands beside him, looking exasperated by his father's display. Claire, however, cuts through the emotion with a sudden, serious request. She turns to Aglia, her expression determined. Aglia looks at her, curious. With unwavering directness, Claire asks His Highness to marry her. The room goes silent. Aglia stands on the staircase, looking down at Claire, a knowing smile playing on his lips. He reveals that he had intended to say that first. He reminds her that he had told her as much during the first banquet. Lord Bulk stands in the background, adjusting his glasses, looking entirely unsurprised by this development. Claire, however, is not just speaking of romance, she is speaking of strategy. She insists that before they tackle the work that remains, and she acknowledges there is much work to be done, she wishes to be with him. She reaches out, taking his hand. Aglia closes his eyes, his smile deepening, and accepts her logic, stating that he understands. Aglia then formally takes the initiative. He holds her hand gently and, with proper solemnity, asks her once again to marry him. Claire's cheeks flush, and she lets out a small sound of surprise. She narrates that the wedding preparations began immediately. With a radiant smile, she accepts, formally addressing him as Your Highness Aglia. However, the blissful atmosphere hits a snag when administrative reality crashes into Claire's expectations. Her eyes widen in genuine shock as she shouts, asking if there is really no marriage contract. Lord Bulk, standing with the composure of a bureaucrat who has seen everything, explains the local customs. For royalty, marriages are recorded on parchment. Claire, frantic, asks about family registers and genealogy for everyone else. Bulk explains that for the royal family, the marriage is witnessed by the people through festivals and public declarations. For nobles and commoners, they simply file for marriage, divorce, and births with the local government. Claire is horrified by the looseness of this system. She argues that even with careful management, simply offering a declaration is too vague and prone to falsehoods. She points out that while this might be acceptable for commoners, for the nobility, it is deeply disturbing. Balk adds that now that paper distribution has started, officials are likely just copying the old wooden forms onto printed paper. He explains that previously, government offices wrote records on pieces of wood, which the state then managed. Claire presses her point with fervor. She envisions a chaotic future, arguing that if bloodlines are not kept clear, it will lead to significant conflict. She asserts that marriage is both a commitment and a contract. This is especially true for nobles, she explains, who possess lands and estates and are responsible for governing them. Her mind is already racing towards legal reform. Aglia watches her, clearly admiring her passion. He comments that it is a good thing Claire is creating a new kind of marriage in this country. He assures her that if she has a suggestion, they can work something out. Claire, however, clarifies that she does not intend to do anything completely new. She is thinking of adapting existing concepts. Claire continues her train of thought, her expression softening as she looks at Aglia. She admits that this is also about him and her. She explains her hope to strengthen the connections between houses and between people. She theorizes that the lack of books in the country may have prevented the spread of technology and knowledge to the common people. She identifies a critical cultural gap. There is no religion in this country, and the royal family is treated as a deity. She reasons that in religious societies, people would swear vows by a god. They would promise to take care of each other and not betray one another. But here, without that religious binding, what rules should they make? She worries that if they make a marriage strictly a contract, it will be difficult to break it off if one party is wronged. She acknowledges the cultural differences that make this difficult. Later, Aglia and Claire are having tea. Aglia notices Claire's distress. She is lost in thought, her brow furrowed. He apologizes for interrupting their tea time but asks if she is okay, advising her not to put too much effort into her worrying. He correctly deduces the source of her anxiety. It is about their marriage. Claire looks at him, surprised by his perceptiveness. She admits that she is indeed having trouble with the marriage contract. She takes a sip of milk tea, finding comfort in its taste even if it has gone cold. She realizes she should consult the people closest to her. Aglia, listening to her concerns, suggests that her story might have given him an idea. He tells her to think about it while she works, but reveals that he plans to visit Lord Balk himself the next day. He encourages her to forget about it for now, drink her tea, and go to bed. The narrative jumps to a meeting between Aglia, Claire, and Lord Balk. Aglia, looking confident, proposes that they just need to simplify the problem. He suggests a uniform style of marriage for everyone, regardless of status, commoner, royalty, or aristocrat. Claire's eyes light up as she realizes the direction he is taking, an all-in-one solution. Aglia brings up the legal systems of the Fatenam Empire, specifically the existence of qualified witnesses for every contract. Claire defines this role, a person who has passed a test to demonstrate an understanding of contract law. Balk, holding a quill, looks intrigued. He asks if Aglia intends to create a law requiring such a person to be present at the signing of marriage or employment contracts. Aglia confirms this is the path they are exploring. The plan expands rapidly. Aglia suggests having every government official in every city take the certification exam. Lord Balk states he has no objections. Claire adds to the proposal, suggesting that the government support the project for 10 years to make it widely known to the public. She also proposes that a guilty party must pay alimony for dissolving an unreasonable marriage. They discuss the economics of the system. A witness fee will be charged when a qualified person is present to sign the contract. However, to ensure fairness, the fee will be adjusted according to the status of the witness, ensuring commoners can pay it without difficulty. Claire volunteers to draft the proposal herself to present to the men. Balk notes that it is a good idea to qualify this role as a side job, and adds that a monthly government allowance would prevent qualified witnesses from quitting. Lord Balk, watching Claire work, expresses his admiration. He attributes the success of this planning to Lady Claire's immense talent. Claire, blushing slightly at the praise, sets a timeline. She will have the underlay draft finished in about a month. After that, they can move on to printing certificates and qualification books. Balk, perhaps relieved that the timeline is feasible, remarks that he thought it would take a year. Claire continues to brainstorm, realizing she needs a name for this credential that will tie everything together. She recalls that in the Empire, there were plenty of reference books. She defines the role, a qualified person who exercises power in the contract. She notes that in this country, the highest rank is royalty. She envisions a system with laws, definitions, and testing standards. She recalls that in Fatenam, the title was Fair Trade Officer. She considers it a bit long and stiff. She thinks about the nature of the title, something that can be conferred on a commoner who can read and write and has the qualifications. She muses that perhaps a peerage title would be nice. She brainstorms keywords, fairness, responsibility, efforts to obtain a title. She scribbles furiously, considering breaking the title down by job description number. She writes down potential names: a stone rule, a responsible baronet. She seems excited by the idea of using a minor noble title like baronet for this civil service role. 3 days later, the scene shifts to the delivery of the draft. Claire, looking manic and sporting heavy eye bags from lack of sleep, presents a massive stack of papers to Lord Bulk. Bulk looks at the stack, intimidated, and asks from where to where the draft extends. He mentally notes that her eye bags are terrible. Claire cheerfully replies, "From the beginning to the end." Lord Bulk, overwhelmed by the sheer volume of the text, adjusts his monocle and diplomatically states that reviewing it will take time. Claire looks disappointed, letting out a deflated sound. Bulk smiles gently, suggesting they proceed after he has actually read it. Before Claire can protest or try to work more, her maids intervene. Gwenna and another maid drag Claire away, insisting that she has been working too hard and needs to rest. They tell her that Lord Bulk has plans and she is interrupting, and that she needs to take the day off and not leave her room. Gwenna promises that Lord Bulk will look over it and show it to His Highness. Back in her room, Claire sits in a chair, feeling a wave of self-doubt. She thinks to herself that she is really not a very smart person. She worries that she was interrupting Lord Bulk and that her productivity was just a high from lack of sleep. A maid interrupts her spiraling thoughts, asking about her diet, noting that it must be different here than in her homeland. The maid asks kindly if there is anything specific Claire would like to eat. Claire admits she has never been much of a foodie, though she enjoys the snacks here. However, a specific craving hits her. She asks for pudding. The maid looks confused, wondering what kind of food that is. Claire realizes she hasn't had it in ages. The maid offers to ask the kitchen staff. Claire, realizing the recipe might not exist here, perks up. She offers to write the recipe down immediately because she knows it. She grabs a pen and paper, eager to be useful even in this small way. The maid takes the recipe, smiling, and tells Claire she is like a mother, always filled with love. The maid excuses herself to go to the kitchen, strictly warning Claire not to leave the room for a few minutes. Claire agrees, left alone in the quiet room. She looks out the window, noting that it is a beautiful day. Suddenly, the peace is broken. A strange figure appears in the tree directly outside Claire's window. It is a young man with dark skin and long hair, lounging casually on a branch, eating a piece of fruit. Claire stares at him, baffled, asking internally who that is. The stranger notices her staring. He puts a finger to his lips and asks her not to tell anyone he was there. He introduces himself simply as Gersh, and says, "See you later," before disappearing or signaling his departure. Claire is left stunned, staring at the empty space where the intruder just was. The afternoon light filters through the large window of the royal guest room, illuminating Claire as she sits in a high-backed chair, her attention captured by a figure outside. Perched casually in the tree beyond the glass is a young man with dark skin and long, mysterious black hair, a visual rarity in this country. He introduces himself simply as Gersh before disappearing from view. Moments later, the door to the room opens, and a maid enters, asking if Claire called. Claire, turning her attention back to the interior, mentions the pudding. The maid confirms they can serve it for dinner, her demeanor bright and efficient. Claire offers her thanks, instructing the maid to extend her gratitude to the kitchen staff as well. Alone again, Claire's thoughts drift to the stranger she saw. She deduces he must be a laborer from Nagier, the country known for sericulture, who has recently joined the castle's workforce. She recalls seeing a child with dark hair and brown skin walking in the yard earlier, dressed in an unusual outfit that signaled a strong sense of foreign identity. She resolves to stay quiet about Gersh's name to avoid causing him trouble. Her mind wanders to the concept of sericulture, the cultivation of silkworms, noting that silk production in Valetinier has yet to fully take root. She remembers that her wedding dress is to be commissioned from Nagier's famed belled silk. This sparks a determination in her to learn more about their culture in the future. A memory surfaces, unbidden and sharp. Claire recalls a conversation about kneaded silk, a material she had never seen used in her father's clothes. In the memory, her sister's voice cuts through, dismissive and cruel, declaring that Claire is a very plain girl, regardless of what she wears, implying she cannot match the beauty of the dress. The memory shifts to the present reality, where her maid reassures her that the dress will look great on her. Claire, however, harbors internal doubts, feeling she is not supposed to wear something so grand. The maid interrupts this self-deprecation with a warm cultural anecdote. She explains a custom where a seamstress puts a single stitch into a wedding dress while wishing for the bride's happiness. The maid mimics the action with her fingers, playfully announcing that she, too, will add a stitch to wish Lady Claire happiness. Claire stares at her, stunned, admitting it is the first time she has heard of such a custom. The maid beams, affirming their closeness, leaving Claire to process the overwhelming realization that someone is genuinely wishing for her happiness. Later that night, the atmosphere in the room settles into a quiet calm. The maid notes that Claire has been staying up late frequently and urges her to rest. Claire wonders if she got a little overexcited. The maid prepares the bed, promising to leave the window open to allow a nice breeze to circulate while Claire sleeps. Claire thanks her, and the room goes dark as she drifts off. The peace shatters abruptly. A hand reaches out, shaking Claire awake. She jolts up, startled, to find Gersh standing by her bedside. He apologizes for the fright, explaining nonchalantly that he did not know it was a lady's room. He admits he was slacking off from his menial job because, while it pays well, the work finishes too quickly. Claire, recovering her composure, scolds him, stating that he should never enter a room alone with a lady, regardless of the open window, as it is startling. Internally, she assesses the threat level and decides he does not plan to attack her. She introduces herself haltingly as Claire. Gersh smiles, satisfied that they have formally met. He promises not to intrude again but admits he wanted to ask for her name one last time. Claire wonders if he realizes she is royalty, but he cuts into her thoughts with a cultural explanation. In his country, an open front door or window is an invitation to enter. Claire corrects this misunderstanding, telling him he can use the tree branches outside between morning and early evening if he wishes, but he must not enter. She finds his reserved nature surprisingly likable and decides he does not seem like a bad person. Suddenly, the threat of discovery looms. Claire warns him not to let the ladies-in-waiting find him, as they would treat him as a suspicious person. Gersh shrugs it off, stating he is usually out of the room anyway and just happened to be there today. Seizing the opportunity, Claire asks if he can tell her about his country, Niger. Gersh agrees but demands a promise in return. Claire thanks him, and he adds that he likes the idea of a book, finding it interesting. He expresses a desire to write a book about his country someday. Gersh asks if he should address her as Lady Claire. Claire warns him that due to her higher status, using her name might get him caught. She lays down strict rules. They talk with the window between them, and he must never come inside. She reasons that if he is discovered, he might be less likely to be scolded if he uses her formal title. Gersh agrees to keep his word and tell her about the kingdom of Niger. He adds a final condition: if he sees a maid, he will leave without being seen. Before departing, Gersh offers a secret that cannot be written down in a book. He hands her a small package, stating he just wanted to get her name and give her this item. He bids her goodnight and vanishes into the night. Claire examines the gift, nutritional supplements from Niger. Gersh had noted she looked pale. Claire takes the pills, noting they have a strong smell but a subtle taste. As she settles back into bed, she realizes Gersh spoke beautiful Vietnamese. The core of her body begins to feel warm, the medicine taking effect. The narrative shifts to the following day. A plate of dark, glossy pudding sits on a table, sparkling under the light. Claire takes a bite, marveling at the unusual texture and delicious taste. She asks if it is a dessert from Vietnam. The maid explains it is pudding made with eggs, milk, and sugar. The problem, she notes, is that the ingredients do not last long in Valentinier, which is a hot country. She explains they use groundwater for cooling. Claire is fascinated, contrasting this with Vietnam's use of ice houses to store ice year-round. She expresses a desire to tour the kitchen to see how they work and thank them personally. Later, Claire sits with His Highness Aglia. He brings up the draft she submitted. Claire expresses her happiness at being able to experience these cultural differences in her daily life, acknowledging that there are civilizations the Empire does not possess. Aglia notes that since it is a new system for this country, he wants to hear what the civil servants have to say about it. Claire agrees, suggesting they leave the final details to the civilian staff once the main points are discussed. Aglia reveals he discussed the matter with Lord Balk that day. He tells Claire she will be the first person in the country to write a book about being a living person with knowledge. Claire smiles, admitting she enjoyed both reading and drafting the document. Claire expresses a wish to create more books if allowed. Aglia jokes that her ambitious stories sound like they will happen in 3 days. Claire explains her long-term vision. If learning is established as entertainment, literacy rates will rise, and a publishing business could flourish. She clarifies that while she cannot do it in 3 days, she is happy to take things slowly in this country. Aglia laughs softly, advising her not to stay up all night again. The work on the peerage draft continues. Claire outlines 3 core requirements for a baronet: managing contracts responsibly, proper compliance with the law, and cherishing the connection between people. She emphasizes that this role is important. She identifies these as the minimum requirements for anyone seeking the title. The discussion moves to the practical aspect of the seal. Claire explains that when one receives a peerage, they sign their name and get stamped by the state as proof. She ponders what would be a suitable seal for this purpose. Claire walks down a hallway, deep in thought. She considers the perspective of Aglia and Lord Balk, worrying that a design by them might be seen as cheap or biased because she is too familiar with them. She reasons that since the peerage itself acts as a balance, putting a complex symbol on it might not be right. She decides she needs to familiarize herself with life in this country to find a solution. She aims for a design that even illiterate people can intuitively understand as a balanced contract. She returns to the window, finding Gersh lounging in the tree. She asks if he is done with work. Gersh confirms he is. Claire hesitates, calling him Young La, before correcting herself to Lady Claire. She asks for his advice, promising not to tell anyone about it. Gersh agrees, though he warns her not to mention he helped, as it is too much trouble. Claire explains her dilemma about the seal design. Gersh offers a simple, practical solution. Why don't you just put wheat and rice on that scale? He explains that in this country, wheat and rice are worth the same. Claire's eyes light up. It represents fairness and responsibility at a glance. Gersh elaborates that while the value of wheat has not decreased, the country buys wheat from Valetinier. Conversely, rice exports have increased, leading to more rice farmers and domestic consumption, balancing the profits perfectly. Claire is struck by the elegance of the solution. She thanks Gersh, acknowledging his help was vital. She notes that wheat is still a main ingredient in other countries, despite allergies. Grateful, she asks Gersh if there is anything he wants as a reward. Gersh thinks for a moment. He explains that in his country, they have drinking parties with instruments, songs, and dancing, whereas here, music is only for festivals. He asks for a musical instrument. Claire agrees to look for one. Gersh specifies a lute. Claire recognizes the name from books but admits she has never seen one in person. Gersh describes it as a stringed instrument played with the hands, not with a bow like a violin. Suddenly, a voice calls out, "Lady Claire," from the hallway. A maid is bringing tea. Gersh senses the approach immediately. He promises to dedicate a song to Claire once he gets the instrument, then quickly retreats, saying he has to go. Later, Claire presents her work to Aglia. He welcomes her warmly as the crown princess. Claire explains that she wanted to verify the facts before making it official. She clarifies that it wasn't a lack of trust in Gersh, but due diligence. She confirms she checked the value of wheat and rice with the finance and administration departments. Aglia is pleased with her thoroughness. Claire reports that thanks to her work, the documents are in order. Aglia observes that she seems busy for someone who was supposedly reckless, yet she welcomes him with open arms. He offers to show her around the prepared documents. Claire reiterates the goal: the more people hold these titles, the more contracts are signed. They are using a symbol familiar to the average person: rice and wheat on a balance scale. Gersh was right about their value. Privately, Claire reflects that this symbol will help the country's development. Now, her focus shifts to thanking Gersh. The narrative summarizes the progress. The seal was decided, and with the work of artisans and civil servants, a finished manuscript was ready for His Majesty in 2 months. However, a problem remains. The lute does not appear to be among the items used in the royal palace. Claire admits she has never even heard of it being there. She decides to go to town to buy the thank you gift herself. Standing in the bustling city street, she is amazed by the sights of the shops. Her maids are supportive, noting she has never been out of town except for work. They encourage her to search for the instrument. One maid brings up a practical point: Claire has been getting paid for a few months. She asks if Claire knows anything about her budget. Claire freezes, stammering that she doesn't have any money. The maids look at her, stunned. They inform her that she has enough money to buy not just an instrument, but a whole orchestra. Claire is left speechless, unaware of her own wealth. In a quiet, sunlit room where Prince Aglia and Lady Claire sit across from one another at a small, elegant table. Aglia lifts a porcelain teacup to his lips, the steam rising in delicate wisps as he sips with composed grace, his demeanor calm and detached. In stark contrast, Claire leans forward earnestly, her hands pressed together in a gesture of pleading prayer, her eyes wide with anticipation. She has just proposed a venture into the capital's town on her own, a request that hangs heavily in the air between them. Aglia lowers his cup, his expression shifting to one of mild admonishment as he addresses her desire. He explains the reality of their future, noting that once their marriage is finalized and she is unveiled to the public, the anonymity required for a casual walk through the streets will become an impossibility. His concern is palpable. He believes Aglia is far more worried about something other than mere safety. Claire, however, remains undeterred by his caution. She counters his worries with a confident smile, asserting that she will be perfectly fine because she has her trusted maids, Gwenna and Melissa, to ensure her safety. Seeing her resolve, and perhaps wanting to grant her this fleeting freedom, Aglia relents. He tells her to go ahead and enjoy a change of scenery, though his permission comes with an undercurrent of internal conflict. His thoughts betray a deep-seated insecurity. He worries that if he clings to her too tightly or follows her, he might appear easy or overbearing, potentially damaging his image in her eyes. He questions why he is so prone to worry, his mind racing with scenarios that fuel his anxiety. Suddenly, the atmosphere shifts from casual conversation to intense protectiveness. Aglia reaches out, his hand grasping Claire's wrist firmly, stopping her movement. He pulls her attention sharply toward him, his gaze hardening as he issues a strict command. She is not to follow anyone who attempts to flirt with or hit on her. Claire flinches at the sudden contact and the gravity of his tone, her face flushing as she stammers a denial, insisting she would never do such a thing. Aglia does not let go immediately. Instead, he bares his heart, confessing that she is his first love and his only companion for the rest of his life. He admits that it saddens him when he feels she does not trust his judgment or his feelings. The intensity of the moment softens as Aglia realizes his outburst might have been too forceful. He releases her, his composure cracking slightly as he sheepishly asks if she still intends to accuse him of potential infidelity. Claire, understanding the depth of his affection, listens intently as he mumbles a request, his face turning a shade of crimson. He asks that when the time comes for their honeymoon, they hold hands. The simplicity and innocence of the request strike a chord with Claire. Her expression transforms into a radiant smile, sparkles seemingly floating around her as she beams at him, promising to fulfill that wish. Aglia, overwhelmed by his own vulnerability and her dazzling response, turns away, covering his face with his hand to hide his embarrassment, declaring he won't say it again. In the background, the maids Melissa and Gwenna observe this tender exchange with undisguised delight. They tremble with excitement, hands over their mouths to stifle their giggles, charmed by the romance unfolding before them. Aglia, noticing their reaction, feels the weight of the situation, a matter of life and death, for his dignity, crashing down on him. The narrative transitions to the following day. A grand, ornate carriage stands ready, its dark frame contrasting with the bright day. Claire, now dressed for her outing, sits inside with Melissa and Gwenna. The maids fawn over her appearance, telling her she looks very pretty today. They admire the classiness and fashionable nature of their outfits, which causes Claire to wonder if her own attire is perhaps too modest. She questions internally if she is too plain or if she fails to stand out enough, a flicker of insecurity passing through her mind. With a command to depart, the carriage lurches forward, carrying them toward the bustling life of the capital. They arrive at the market, a vibrant tapestry of sights and sounds. The architecture immediately catches their attention. The roofs of the stalls are constructed from dyed, thick cloth, creating a beautiful and colorful canopy overhead. Claire marvels at the aesthetic, her eyes taking in the variety of goods on display. The maids point out that the market sells all kinds of things, their attention drawn to a water pump where moving the handle dispenses water. As they navigate the crowd, the group decides that holding hands is a necessary precaution to prevent getting separated in the throng of people. The maids reflect that this trip has given them a better understanding of Lady Claire's character. Leaving the chaotic energy of the main market, the group wanders into a different section of the town. They pass through a chic neighborhood, distinct for its brick buildings. Claire notes the architectural shift, observing the use of baked bricks and seared wood. She deduces that these materials are utilized to make the buildings more resistant to water and moisture compared to their stone counterparts. The area is quieter, and they struggle to find what they are looking for, a lute. Claire's gaze lands on a solitary figure sitting in a corner, far removed from the bustling market stalls. It appears to be a stall, though she notes it is barely one at all, likely not government licensed given its distance from the main trade area. The man sitting there holds a musical instrument. Claire approaches, asking if the instrument is indeed a lute and inquiring about its price. As she looks closer, she analyzes the man's appearance. He has brown skin and wears clothes similar to Gersh, leading her to conclude that he is also a Nigerian. The man, an older individual with a mustache and head wrap, looks up at her. He seems impressed that she knows the specific name of the instrument. He quotes her a price of 5 silvers. Without hesitation, Claire produces the coins, the silver glinting in the light as she hands them over. The narration notes that this sum is significant, enough for a couple to survive on for an entire month. The man accepts the payment, his expression unreadable but acknowledging the transaction. Melissa and Gwenna, who had been waiting nearby, catch up to her, surprised by the sudden purchase. They question if she is happy with it, noting its expense. Claire smiles gently, thanking the man and promising to treasure the instrument. To her maids, she explains that it is a thank you gift for a friend, though she keeps the identity of this friend a secret for now, promising to tell them when the time is right. The group continues their shopping excursion, eventually stopping at a jewelry store. Claire selects 2 brooches with gemstones. She explains her choice. One has a gemstone matching the hair color of His Highness Prince Aglia, and the other matches Claire's own hair color. In a gesture of appreciation and solidarity, she presents these items to Melissa and Gwenna. She apologizes for not telling them sooner but admits she is a private person who dislikes showing off. She asks them to keep this between them for now, even from His Highness. Claire expresses her philosophy that they should both have each other's gemstones. The maids are overwhelmed with gratitude, thanking her profusely for the wonderful gifts. Claire reflects internally that she loves shopping primarily because she wants to make someone happy. As evening approaches and the sky darkens, the atmosphere in the town shifts. The group, now carrying their purchases, walks through a narrower street. Suddenly, their path is blocked by a group of rough-looking men. The men, clearly intoxicated, leer at them, suggesting they have a drink at a bar before going home. They comment lewdly on the well-dressed Beppins, a term for exceptional beauties, wandering the commoners section of the royal capital. The situation turns menacing as one of the men implies they might not make it home today. Claire and her maids recoil, fear evident on their faces as the men encroach upon their space. Just as the tension peaks, a foot steps firmly into the frame, interrupting the harassment. A voice cuts through the air, remarking that it is rare to see Lady Claire out in the town. Claire looks up, startled, to see the loot seller she had bought from earlier standing there. He addresses her with recognition. He notes that her presence and actions mean she has the approval of the elder. Claire realizes this man is connected to the one she bought the loot from. The man, a Nigerian with long braided hair and dark skin, acknowledges the loot she purchased was for him. The thugs, annoyed by the interruption, shout at the newcomer to get out of the way. They assert their claim, yelling that they were the ones hitting on the girls first. The Nigerian man, unfazed, steps forward to protect the women. He tells the thugs not to mess with them. He turns to Claire, stating that she has been recognized and that he will take care of the situation, viewing it as a perfect opportunity to demonstrate his capabilities to her. With fluid, lethal motion, the Nigerian man strikes. He moves faster than the thugs can react, his movements a blur of precision violence. He sends the men sprawling, their aggression instantly replaced by shock and pain. He stands over them, his demeanor radiating a terrifying calm. He asks the thugs if they know where Lady Claire and her friends live. Before they can answer, he answers for them. It's in the palace. The palace. The thugs stare up at him, realizing the magnitude of their mistake. The Nigerian man continues, his voice dropping to a chilling register. He informs them that had they laid a hand on her, they would have been lightly beheaded, or, worse, tortured and then hanged. He dismisses them like unruly children, telling them to be good boys and go home. The thugs scramble away in terror, their screams fading into the night. The man turns back to Claire, checking if she is safe. Claire, recovering from the fright, confirms she is. The man then addresses the matter of the loot. He asks if she is giving it to him. Claire confirms this. He then proposes a deal. In exchange for his help and the loot, he wants a chance to talk to Crown Prince Aglia. He believes that he, Aglia, and Claire can have a productive conversation. He tells her he will see her tonight. Before leaving, he adds a cryptic comment that, "We have acknowledged Lady Claire," explaining that they like people who are willing to do small things for them. He bids them farewell until the evening. Claire turns to Melissa and Gwenna, thanking them for keeping her safe during the ordeal. The maids are confused, asking who that man was. Claire admits she doesn't fully understand what is happening but identifies him as a secret friend. Internally, she feels that despite his dangerous skills, he intends no harm to her. The scene transitions to the interior of the palace later that night. Aglia stands in a dimly lit room, his face a mask of shock and concern as he processes the news that Claire was attacked in the city. Claire stands before him, calm, explaining the situation. She mentions the elder and the man who helped them with amazing skills. She refers to them as "we," echoing the man's words. Suddenly, a voice interrupts, announcing his presence. The Nigerian man from the alley steps into the light. Aglia turns, startled by the intruder. Claire notes that she has told Aglia a lot about him. The man apologizes for a previous remark where he suggested summoning the crown prince was a trivial matter. Aglia, regaining his composure, notices the man's attire and asks about his clothes. The man introduces himself formally as Gersh from the nation of Niger. He explains that his current attire is his work uniform for his day job. Gersh begins to lay out the political context of his presence. A map appears in the narrative visualization, showing the territories of Valatinir, Niger, and Phaeton. Gersh explains that Niger is a small country, historically known only for its sericulture, silk farming. He details that they provide sericultural techniques and technicians to Valatinir, which has recently become independent from the Phaeton Empire, and in return, Valatinir provides them with an abundance of food. However, Gersh reveals a deeper truth. He states that sericulture is merely a front. He explains that they even built a road for it, as the only geographical connection to Niger is through Valatinir. His voice drops as he discloses Niger's real specialty. The narrative emphasizes the gravity of his next words: intelligence and assassination. Aglia and Claire listen in stunned silence as Gersh continues. He explains that things have changed dramatically now that Valatinir is independent. Previously, they operated on a case-by-case basis depending on money, but without a powerful backer, they can no longer afford to deal with countries haphazardly. He warns that if they are not careful, they could inadvertently start a war. Gersh then gets straight to the point. He addresses Prince Aglia directly, making a bold proposition. He asks if Aglia would like to host the Shadow Nagier, the true face of his country, within his own nation. He reveals that the encounter in the town was a test devised by the elders. He apologizes for testing Lady Claire but admits he liked the way she treated him when they first met. He highlights that Claire personally went out of her way to buy a lute from an elder for the people of Nagier. Gersh interprets this action as a sign of her capability. She is sensitive to signs and able to correctly detect information, understanding that rice and wheat are of equal value. Aglia realizes that this information gathering is Gersh's livelihood. Gersh concludes his pitch by reiterating the philosophy of his people. He states that the people of Nagier favor those who are willing to do the little things for them. He looks intensely at the royal couple, declaring that this is why he wants to work with them, the people who will lead this country in the future. He affirms that we, like Lady Claire. A heavy geopolitical discussion, the weight of a nation's future pressing down upon Prince Aglia and Crown Princess Claire. They scrutinize the dossier of a neighboring territory, the small, mountainous enclave known as Nagier. Aglia, with a furrowed brow, dissects the reputation of this sericultural nation, noting that while they are known for their silk, the entire country survives by engaging in the backstage business of the world. His voice carries a tremor of skepticism as he reveals the true nature of their potential partner. They demand an exclusive contract not merely for their specialty silk, but for the darker arts of espionage and assassination. The prince's hesitation manifests physically as he turns away, admitting he lacks the same boundless faith in these shadow operatives that Claire seems to possess. He sees no immediate necessity to join forces with a group that thrives in the dark. Gersh, the enigmatic figure representing Nagier, interjects with a sharp, piercing question that cuts through Aglia's reluctance. He challenges the prince's logic, highlighting the precarious position of Valentinir. He speaks of the country's rapid development, the expansion of large grain-growing areas, the mass diffusion of technology, and the flourishing production of paper. Yet, he lets the silence hang before delivering his critical point regarding silk, a rare and precious commodity. Gersh offers a single, vital piece of intelligence to the royal couple, positioning himself as a broker of survival rather than a mere merchant. The atmosphere shifts abruptly as Gersh's words strike a nerve. Aglia and Claire stand frozen, their eyes widening in realization as the gravity of their situation descends upon them. Gersh poses a rhetorical question that dismantles their sense of security. What nation would not covet a wealthy, resource-rich land that lacks any defensive shields against the looming empire? He suggests that having a few shadow operatives around is not a luxury but a necessity to prevent being stabbed in the back when vigilance wanes. He astutely observes that Claire has been consumed by the preparations for her marriage, a distraction that has left her blind to external threats. Claire, her hand rising to her chest in a gesture of sudden awareness, admits that her focus on ordering the country's interior caused the possibility of invasion to slip her mind completely. The scene dissolves into a memory of a negotiation within a dense forest, where the sunlight barely penetrates the canopy, casting long shadows that mirror the nature of the discussion. Gersh, perched casually yet predatorily on a tree branch, explains the geopolitical reality. Nagier is topographically and commercially landlocked, connected only to Valentinir. He confesses that reliance on their neighbor was inevitable. He identifies Lady Claire as the trigger for this entire arrangement. From his high vantage point, he dictates the terms. They must form an alliance. When the question of price arises, specifically for protection, Gersh's answer is absolute. The kingdom of Nagier pledges its allegiance to the kingdom of Valentinir. He demands only respect and faith in return. Aglia, standing firm in his royal attire, defers the final verdict, stating he must discuss this weighty matter with his father, as the decision transcends his authority. Claire's internal calculations manifest as she reflects on her pivotal role in these events. She understands that Gersh positioned her as the linchpin because he recognized her status as the crown princess and initiated contact directly. She objectively assesses her value, acknowledging herself as the primary contributor to the country's development and the architect of the peace treaty with Phaeton. Her loyal attendants, hovering protectively, reaffirm their devotion, stating that Lady Claire's orders take precedence above all else. The narrative transitions to the grand throne room of Valentinir, where the royal family gathers to deliberate. The king and queen sit in judgment while Aglia and Claire present their case. Claire, with unwavering resolve in her eyes, declares that she sees no reason to reject cooperation with Nagier. Aglia admits his profound surprise at the turn of events. The court whispers with anxiety, the maids tremble, whispering that the man from Nagier is dangerous. A mustachioed advisor cautions the king, warning that revealing the true identities of those who dwell in the underworld carries immense risk. He fears this alliance could create an opening for an attack on Valentinir from within. However, the analysis deepens as they dissect Gersh's motives. The advisor suggests that the urgency of Najir's situation forces their hand. Another observer notes that Gersh's approach subtly signaled that they hold Claire's life in their hands, yet he did so in a manner that demonstrated a peculiar fondness for her. A bespectacled advisor argues for the strategic benefit, stating that pulling together the backsides, the shadow operations, strengthens the connection for both parties. Aglia voices his agreement with Claire, acknowledging that while Lord Balk knows more about sericulture, Najir's expertise is undeniable and will become a specialty for Valentinir. Suddenly, the king's composure cracks. His face contorts not with political strategic concern, but with the frantic panic of a father. He interprets the alliance through a personal lens, shouting that he cannot give away his daughter. He wails about wanting to see his grandson's face, creating a scene of comedic hysteria amidst the serious council. He adamantly refuses to give up Claire to Najir. One of the advisors, maintaining a stoic expression, tries to steer the conversation back to national politics, expressing a desire for Lady Claire to continue serving the state. The confusion clears as Aglia clarifies the situation. They have decided to form an alliance with Najir, not a marriage pact. The king's outburst is gently corrected, with someone pointing out that his focus is entirely on the wrong point. The tension evaporates, replaced by a warm, supportive atmosphere. The family reassures Claire, telling her they know exactly what the discussion entails and that they believe in her judgment. They encourage her to trust them in return. Returning to the forest negotiation, Aglia poses a crucial question to the shadowed figure. He suggests that prioritizing Claire is, in fact, a form of protection for Najir itself. Gersh confirms this, stating that Najir will join forces as the shadow of Valentinir. He solidifies the pact with a vow, because they hold an affection for Claire. If Valentinir does not betray them, Najir will never betray the kingdom, nor will they touch Lady Claire. The pact is sealed in the dappled light of the woods. As the timeline shifts to the following day, the true nature of Najir's leadership comes to light. Gersh reveals that the individuals Claire met previously were elders. He outlines the immediate future. Alliance papers will be interspersed with sericulture documents, and the elders will arrive to negotiate formally. Aglia, puzzled by the structure, questions if Najir is a kingdom, confused by the mention of elders rather than a king. A deeper explanation follows. Najir operates as a community where different people manage specific jobs, and chiefs head these communities. Gersh drops the final veil, announcing himself as the chief of the Shadow Najir. Aglia stares, stunned that someone so young holds such power. Gersh explains the meritocratic nature of his society. He holds his title simply because he is the best at what he does. He takes credit for pushing the alliance initiative. He expresses a genuine respect for Valentinir, citing their determination to start a war of independence and live on their own terms as a quality he admires. He suggests that peace is the best outcome for them. The scene softens as Aglia, recovering from the revelations, invites Claire for tea, signaling a moment of respite. The narrative moves to the formalization of the treaty. The king of Valentinir stands tall in the throne room, facing the delegation from Najir. The announcer declares the arrival of the Najir elders and Chief Gersh to form the formal alliance. The terms are laid bare. Valentinir will provide protection to Najir. In exchange, the kingdom of Najir will act as a shadow for Valentinir, undertaking information warfare and assassinations in cases of emergency. Gersh, now dressed in formal attire that still hints at his rogue nature, adds a grim caveat. If the situation were reversed and Valentinir betrayed them, their first priority would be Claire, implying they would use her to retaliate. Claire, facing this double-edged sword, stands resolute. Her eyes burn with determination as she declares herself ready. The king looks at the elder of Najir, a weathered man with a thick white mustache, and confirms the bond. With the signatures of the king of Valentinir and the elder of Najir, the alliance between the two nations is cemented. The ceremony concludes with a solemn pledge. The elder of Najir speaks poetically, stating that the shadow lies within the body and the light, and to this end, the people of Najir pledge their lives. He formally declares that from this moment on, Najir is the shadow of the kingdom of Valentinir. The king graciously asks the elder to raise his head and take his hand. He acknowledges the universal truth that no one lives without a shadow, accepting the alliance and the pledge as sufficient bond. The handshake between the regal king and the rugged elder marks a historical event, a contract signed not just in ink but in destiny. Immediately following the ceremony, the utility of this new alliance proves itself. Gersh, lounging casually in the royal chambers, wastes no time delivering critical intelligence. He brings news of La Muslu, a kingdom located in the northernmost part of the continent. He describes a land known as the Arctic Winter, currently suffering from severe food shortages due to poor fishing conditions. The king, wiping sweat from his brow, asks how this involves Valentinir. Gersh reveals the threat. Rumors suggest La Muslu has begun invading other countries to survive. The threat assessment continues with chilling detail. Gersh describes sturdy ships built for warfare, each capable of carrying 200 men. He reports that La Muslu is working furiously to build a fleet for this purpose. The king realizes the danger. Valetinier cannot afford to distribute food without compensation, yet the threat of invasion is real. Gersh explains the tactical situation. The country closest to La Muslu, Synapse, is too poor to be a viable target. However, Valentinier's rich breadbasket is an attractive prize, and its terrain is vulnerable to a sea-based invasion. The moral weight of the situation settles on the room. It is not merely about economics or national development, it is about the potential loss of human life. The king envisions the chaos of war, merchant associations in port towns disrupted, trading posts destroyed. Claire, observing Gersh's demeanor, detects a hidden solution. She notes his monotone delivery and deduces he is hiding something. She confronts him directly, asserting that he already has a way to avoid this war. Caught, Gersh admits the truth. He proposes a bold economic maneuver. The king should express interest in buying a boat from La Muslu. The king is baffled, noting they have enough fishing boats for their own coastal waters. Gersh corrects him, explaining the concept of a pelagic fishery, where large, sturdy boats roam the ocean for months. Claire instantly grasps the strategy. They will hire La Muslu boats and fishermen to enrich Valentinier's fishing industry. They will trade wheat for pelagic seafood, whales and large fish suitable for drying, caught in the distant seas. Gersh outlines the logistics with the precision of a master strategist. It is a 2-week round trip by boat to La Muslu, but he can be there and back in a week, even traveling overland. He emphasizes the importance of speed in negotiations. Aglia realizes this is why Gersh hurried to form the alliance so quickly. The prince takes charge, promising to prepare a letter of intent with simple terms and conditions immediately. He thanks Nagier for the timely intervention. In the quiet aftermath, Claire clasps her hands in prayer, hoping for the success of these negotiations. She understands the stakes. If Valetinier falls, Nagier will starve. Aglia comforts her, wrapping his hands around hers. He assures her that this time, Nagier will be there to smooth things over. He reflects that sometimes in war one does not get what they want, but this trade deal ensures both sides get what they need, removing the reason to fight entirely. The chapter closes with a sense of shared purpose and optimism, as Aglia and Claire stand together, their wishes for peace moving closer to reality through the power of their new Shadow Alliance. A flurry of administrative activity and civic reorganization, marking a pivotal shift in the geopolitical landscape. Documents are printed and distributed in mass quantities, their purpose to inform the general public about the newly forged alliance with the nation of Nagier. Within the castle walls, a concerted effort takes place to educate the staff and courtiers regarding the nuances of this developing relationship, ensuring that the diplomatic ties are understood by all levels of the hierarchy. Before the Nigerian emissary, the very one who had entrusted Claire with the crucial letter, could make his return, the machinery of commerce begins to turn. Domestic wheat is purchased in bulk and transported to the port city, stockpiled in anticipation of immediate trade with the kingdom of La Muslu. There is an atmosphere of industrious urgency, a sense that much work remains to be done to solidify these fragile new bonds. Through a momentous decision and arduous negotiation, Claire and Prince Aglia have successfully steered their nations away from the precipice of war. A mere week after the tension peaked, the kingdoms of Valetinier and La Muslu stand ready to begin trading, a rapid de-escalation that leaves the populace breathing a collective sigh of relief. In the bustling streets, citizens express their profound gratitude that the specter of conflict has vanished. The wounds of the past are still fresh, and the people, whose lives had so recently been threatened, find solace in the fact that they need not fear for their safety again. As they gaze upon the massive foreign ships docked in the harbor, the sheer scale of the vessels instills a lingering sense of horror at the thought of an invasion that might have been. They reflect on how war traps people in cycles of anger and sadness, leaving them with nowhere to turn, acknowledging that such disasters complicate every human relationship they touch. On the docks, Prince Aglia prepares to receive the foreign delegation. He signals his readiness, and his retinue moves forward. A herald announces the arrival of a messenger from the kingdom of La Muslu. From the gangplank of the imposing ship descends a man of refined appearance. He introduces himself not merely as a messenger, but as the Marquis the head of the treasury, representing the ambassador of La Muslu. He requests to be addressed simply as Glenn. Aglia, maintaining his regal composure, welcomes the Marquis, thanking him for traveling such a great distance and formally introducing himself as the Crown Prince, Aglia Valetinier. The Marquis, Glenn, bows and offers a humble rebuttal to the gratitude, admitting that prior to their negotiations, his nation had arrogantly assumed Aglia's country had nothing of value to offer. He confesses that it was shallow of them to even contemplate an invasion, offering a sincere apology for their past aggression. Aglia, displaying diplomatic grace, apologizes in turn for the unconventional method of invitation, a single letter, that precipitated a transaction beneficial to the foreign power for the long term. Glenn expresses profound thanks for the proposal and the permission granted for pelagic fishery, as well as the food aid that has been extended. The handshake that follows seals the agreement, a physical manifestation of the peace treaty. As Claire observes the Marquis from a short distance, she notes the immaculate state of his attire. After a week at sea, Marquis Glenn remains well-dressed, showing no signs of bad body odor or the rough lifestyle typically associated with long voyages. She marvels internally at the level of technology that must exist aboard that ship to sustain such a pristine lifestyle. Aglia and Glenn exchange pleasantries, but Aglia suggests that they wait until both parties are more comfortable in their respective countries before conducting a tour of the ship's interior, a sentiment Glenn agrees with. The scene shifts to the interior of the castle, where the atmosphere transitions from political negotiation to personal preparation. A maid, her arms laden with boxes, announces with cheerful determination that the time has come to focus on the serious business of wedding planning. Now that Claire's hard work regarding the trade deal has concluded, the staff intends to subject her to a full-fledged noble lady re-education, or rather, a rigorous regime of bride polishing. Days pass in a blur of lessons and aesthetic refinements, continuing the transformation of the former hostage into a royal bride. In a well-lit dressing room, the focus turns to the wedding attire. A senior maid holds up a string of lustrous pearls, noting that the beautiful gems brought by the visitor from La Mousselou are pure white and complement the silk perfectly. She insists that they must be used for the ceremony. Another maid chimes in, dreaming of a pure white dress and debating the type of lace pattern that should be applied to it. Claire, however, recoils at the suggestion. She envisions herself in the ensemble and panics, arguing that with her hair and eyes being so white and blurred, wearing such a white dress would make her look like a stone statue. She fears fading into the background, disappearing into the fabric. The maids immediately rebuke her self-deprecating comment, refusing to let her call herself blurred. They assure her that she is going to be a very beautiful bride. As the discussion continues, the maids mention that the paper Claire introduced is gaining popularity, and numerous designs are being drawn up. They note that the climate and culture here differ from those of the Empire, predicting that the people's dress will gradually evolve from the Phaeton style into something unique to this land. Claire, though flustered, listens as they discuss the edible nature of the shellfish that produce the pearls. She muses that one day, when aquaculture becomes viable, they might be able to expand the scope of their trade even further. The senior maid interrupts this train of thought, pointing out that pearls coming from shells is a phenomenon unique to La Mousselou where fishing thrives, but more importantly, she scolds Claire for getting distracted by work again. She urges the princess to put aside thoughts of trade and decide on the dress design, reminding her that she is now a bride first and foremost. Claire stares at the design sketches, her face flushing. She wonders if she were to wear a dress this extravagant, would Prince Aglia truly find her beautiful? Suddenly, the door bursts open, and Aglia enters the room, apologizing for the intrusion but looking for the Marquis. He freezes, his eyes landing on Claire amidst the fabrics and designs. The maids and Claire are startled, but Aglia recovers quickly. He remarks that her first words of shock were so characteristic of her that he laughed. He compliments her, stating that her beauty is increasing, surely due to her preparations. A court official, Lord Balk, interrupts the moment to announce that the marriage contract is ready for review. The document is presented, a solemn agreement that binds the two lives together. It outlines 3 core conditions that must be complied with: to love and care for each other, to support and help each other, and to trust each other. The contract stipulates that failure to fulfill these 3 conditions requires the signing and submission of a separate document annulling the marriage, a process that must be mediated by a member of the royal family or a nobleman. Furthermore, it explicitly forbids making idle comments that may mislead the partner, demanding that they speak only the truth. At the bottom lies the space for the date and the signatures of the royal or noble baronet witnessing the union. As Claire processes the gravity of the contract, Aglia reveals another surprise. His Majesty the King has sent a gift. It is a decree, already dated, declaring their wedding day a national holiday. Claire is touched, finding the gesture lovely. Aglia explains that until now, the only festivals for the commoners have been harvest festivals. With the new system he is building, he wants to introduce new forms of enjoyment. He asks if she has a name for the holiday. Claire thinks for a moment, reflecting on the significance of the union. This marriage began with the peace treaty that ended the Revolutionary War. It deepened ties with Niger and La Mousselou. She views the marriage as a commitment, a contract that created a new institution. With all of this in mind, and utilizing a phrase known to all the people of the country, she suggests Feast of the Promised Land. Aglia smiles, finding the name perfect. He confirms that on that day, everyone will get to participate in the festivities regardless of their origin. People from Niger, people from La Mousselou. He credits Claire as the one who brought them all together. The weight of his gratitude and the scale of the celebration settle upon her. The narrative moves to the night before the wedding. Claire sits alone in her darkened room, the moonlight filtering through the window. She reflects on the passage of time. It feels as though everything happened so fast, yet simultaneously, it feels like it has been ages. She acknowledges that she is surrounded by good people and is having a great time. Every day is full of life, and she believes she has gotten to know Prince Aglia quite well. However, memories of her past intrude. She recalls being sacrificed for marriage as a child, her own parents trying to kill her. She was labeled a failure, loss of lady's education, and had no place within her own home. She was profoundly alone in Phaeton. A tear escapes her eye, tracing a path down her cheek. She realizes that as a person of the empire, her father will not be invited to the wedding. Consequently, she will never hear her family say, "Congratulations," to her. No one in her blood family wishes her well. The realization brings a wave of sorrow, and she begins to weep openly. Suddenly, a voice cuts through the darkness. Gersh, the Nigerian spy and guard, is perched by the window. He comments that if she cries that much, she will look terrible tomorrow. Claire is startled, trying to stifle her sobs. Gersh instructs her to be quiet. Claire attempts to compose herself, suggesting that she should have learned to take advantage of Prince Aglia at times like this. Gersh counters, asking what man wouldn't want to turn the sad face of the woman he loves into a smile. He asserts that Aglia wouldn't see it as a bother. Claire worries that her sadness would only burden the prince. Gersh shifts his demeanor, offering to tell her an interesting story to distract the crying princess. He begins to explain the harsh realities of the Niger espionage units. He details a breeding strategy. If a Nigerian woman carries a child, she raises it in her own country. However, if a Nigerian man sows a seed abroad and a child is born, they kidnap the child and raise him in Niger. He notes that Nigerian blood rarely shows up in skin color, making them effective spies. The Niger unit's job is espionage, so they perform bedchamber work with both men and women. Claire listens, shocked by the candid and dark nature of the information. Gersh continues, admitting he doesn't think it's right to talk to her about this, but he reveals that his mother was in the actual combat unit. She was once in the company of the Emperor of Phaeton. The implication hangs heavy in the air. Claire connects the dots. It is possible that Gersh is an illegitimate son of the Emperor of Phaeton, sired during a diplomatic or clandestine encounter. Gersh confirms that it is usually royalty who use people like them. His mother went back home and he was born. He looks at Claire with a soft, knowing expression. He tells her that just for today, he has something to say. The subtext is deafening. They may share blood. He is, in all likelihood, her half-brother. He vows to be watching her tomorrow and promises to always protect her. He congratulates her on her marriage, urging her to think of her new family first and to please be happy. He then recalls a promise he made to sing her a song. Gersh begins to sing a lullaby of Phaeton. Claire recognizes the melody instantly. It is nostalgic, a fragment of a childhood she thought was entirely devoid of warmth. As the melody fills the room, she realizes that perhaps she does have a family that thought of her, even if it wasn't the one she lived with. Gersh tells her to cool her eyes, turn off the lights, and sleep. As Claire drifts off, comforted by the song and the revelation of a protector who shares her blood, Gersh whispers into the night that he cannot go public with their connection, but the bond remains. The chapter closes on the image of the dress awaiting the bride, and the quiet resolve of the brother watching over his sister from the shadows. A pristine desk where a quill pen rests in its stand, poised beside an inkwell. A document of immense significance lies flat on the surface, its text neatly inscribed, awaiting the final authorization that will alter the course of history. This day marks a special occasion, one where His Highness Aglia and Claire will sign a formal marriage contract. The purpose of this document extends beyond their union. It serves to promote and instill the very concept of a contract within the consciousness of the nation's people. The event bears the title, The Feast of the Promise, signifying the wedding of His Highness Aglia and Claire. A voice announces the completion of the preparations, signaling that the time has arrived. From this day forward, a new system will guide the kingdom onto a fresh path. The long-awaited moment of Claire's happiness has finally manifested. An observer remarks on the transformation, wondering what kind of magic was employed to achieve such radiance. Claire, seated before a mirror, responds to the compliment with a mixture of pride and defensiveness. She asserts that she has been practicing for this day and sternly warns against anyone referring to her as a blur again. She calls for makeup, presenting herself as a bride of wisdom and beauty. Attention shifts to the accessories that will adorn the bride. A maid presents a cushion box containing a glittering treasure, a gift from Her Majesty the Queen and His Highness Prince Julius. The object is a tiara set with a prominent blue stone, identified by the maid as lapis lazuli. The maid explains that according to the jeweler, the meaning behind this stone, which is also traditionally used in wedding rings, is eternal vows. Claire touches the gift, visibly moved, and remarks on how very sweet the sentiment is. She reflects on a cultural difference, noting that in the kingdom of Valentinir, there is no custom of exchanging rings in marriage. Suddenly, the atmosphere of contemplation shatters as the maids urge her into motion. One maid instructs Lady Claire not to panic or let her curiosity get the better of her. They rush her forward, warning her to be careful not to step on the hem of her dress. The staff intends to show her around, and they demand her cooperation, asking rhetorically what she thinks they are there for. The scene transitions to a moment of quiet intimacy between the betrothed. Prince Aglia stands before Claire, his expression tender. He formally asks, "Will you marry me, Claire?" He confesses that with her, he is convinced that no matter the situation, he can always smile. Claire looks up at him, her eyes wide. She acknowledges that he made her smile. Aglia continues, describing her as the one who taught him to rest when he tends to run too fast. Claire responds with absolute certainty, "Of course, Your Highness Aglia." Claire reflects on her journey, noting that she has been told she lost her ladylike education. Yet, despite this, the people here listen to her without dismissing her out of hand. She reaches out, placing her gloved hand into his. She declares her purpose. She came to be his wife. The setting expands to the grand ceremony. The king stands at the altar, officiating the union, with Aglia and Claire facing him. The king presents the condition: if they will swear to the 3 covenants, they may sign the document. He recites the vows: to love and care for each other, to support and help each other, and to trust each other. A quill pen, decorated with a ribbon, is taken in hand. Claire signs the parchment, the pen scratching against the paper as bubbles of light float around them. Upon the completion of the signatures, the king proclaims Claire Valentinir and Aglia Valentinir united in marriage. He announces to the assembly that they hereby welcome Claire Phaeton as the wife of Aglia Valentinir. Night falls over the castle. The exterior of the royal residence is illuminated by torches and moonlight, standing silent and imposing against the dark sky. Inside, the atmosphere shifts from public celebration to private anxiety. Claire sits alone, her mind racing. She acknowledges that tonight is their wedding night. The word wedding echoes in her mind, causing her distress. She panics, wondering what she should do, admitting that she cannot think straight. A voice instructs her to wait there for a moment. Claire spirals further into nervousness. She realizes they haven't even kissed yet. She frantically reaches for a cup of milk tea, hoping to drink it to calm down. Before she can compose herself, a knock sounds at the door, and Aglia announces his entry. Claire lets out a startled yelp. Aglia enters, dressed in loose nightwear. Claire's eyes widen at his appearance. Aglia approaches her, apologizing for the intrusion. Claire stammers a response. He observes her closely and asks if she is nervous. Claire averts her gaze, flushing deeply. She admits to herself that she wonders if she wouldn't be this nervous if it were merely a marriage of convenience. Aglia gently commands her to come closer. He takes her hand, reassuring her that there is nothing to apologize for. He gazes at her with intensity, telling her not to be afraid. Claire trembles in his arms, unable to stop the physical reaction to the overwhelming emotion. She wonders desperately what she should do. Aglia embraces her, reminding her that they are a married couple now. He instructs her not to use "Your Highness" anymore. Pressed against him, Claire can feel his heart beating intensely. Aglia speaks candidly, admitting it is not natural for him not to know what to do, hinting that he once had a mentor. He acknowledges that he is not the only one who is nervous. Claire agrees, suggesting that perhaps it was just a lesson he received. Aglia confesses that he has never been this nervous before and that his heart is racing right now. He looks into her eyes and tells her that the reason he loves her so much is because she is who she is. He touches her face, vowing that now he is never going to let her go. Claire reflects that finally, they got married. Aglia whispers that he has been in love with her ever since that day. He professes his love plainly, "I love you." Claire feels her heart fill with thoughts of Lord Aglia. She responds, telling him that she, too, adores him. She struggles to articulate the depth of her feelings, finding the intensity almost painful. With their vows, they officially become husband and wife. Claire resolves that from now on, she will be with Lord Aglia. A few days later, the narrative shifts to the practicalities of royal life. Lord Aglia and Claire travel to the port city to purchase wedding gifts for the nobility. Aglia had advised her that gifts and returns are best found in port cities, as the highest quality goods arrive there from foreign countries before reaching the capital. For this task, they receive a little help from Rufus, a merchant who is a friend of the royal family. Rufus smiles, assisting them with the selection. Claire admits internally that she hasn't always been free of depression. She notes that the gifts sometimes reveal how the nobility treats her, specifically viewing her merely as a guest. Despite this, she feels she was able to settle on a pretty good product. The shopping trip concludes, and they believe the task is done. It should have been a simple return trip. However, on the way back to the royal capital, Something changes. Claire notices that before she knew it, the coachman had changed. Aglia reveals that he has already informed the royal court of a detour. They arrive at a location that confuses Claire, and she asks what this place is. Aglia explains that they invited both of them to a festival hosted by the kingdom of Nagier to celebrate with them. The festival is a celebration of the marriage of the future king and queen of their ally. A voice calls out that the star of the show has arrived. Claire stands amidst flowers, and Aglia compliments her, saying the setting looks good on her. He tells her she has become the guest of honor at the festival. The scene explodes into color and sound. Toasts are raised with shouts of cheers. Claire is startled by a sudden cloud of substance, asking what the powder. She marvels at the sight, admitting she has never seen anything like this in any book. People are playing with multicolored powder lutes and dancing in the streets. She watches the musicians and dancers, captivated, noting she has never seen a festival like this. Claire stands beside a woman from Nagier, Gersh in disguise, amidst the festivities. The woman remarks that Nagier is nice, isn't it? Claire agrees, saying she is right and that it is very nice. The woman then probes deeper, asking if, when Claire gets tired of all this power, she would consider Nagier. Claire cuts her off firmly. She states that while Nagier is a nice country, her country is Valatinier. Claire then addresses the woman directly as older brother. Gersh, dropping the pretense, reacts with surprise. Claire reasons that he will always be there to protect her, won't he? Gersh sighs, admitting that her brother is lonely. Claire scolds him by name, Gersh. Gersh deflects, noting that her husband has arrived. Aglia approaches, his face flushed with intoxication. Gersh comments that he has always thought Aglia and Claire were a little too close. Claire observes that Lord Aglia looks very drunk. Aglia shouts enthusiastically, "That's what I want." Gersh wraps an arm around the stumbling prince, declaring it just the thing, and proposing a man-to-man match. Claire watches them, reflecting on the future. She believes they can continue to develop their country. She envisions Lord Aglia and the people of Valatinier moving forward. She sees Valatinier and Nagier together, hand in hand, advancing into the future. She asserts that no matter what obstacles stand in their way, they can overcome them together. And she includes in this vision her brother and all the good people of Nagier. The distant, shadow-laden halls of the Phaeton Empire, where ambition and resentment coil like smoke. A stern patriarch stands before a young woman, Bianca, entrusting her with a grave responsibility. He speaks with disdain, refusing to tolerate what he perceives as a lame attempt by the one they deem uneducated in lady etiquette, a direct reference to Claire. Bianca, embodying the pride and vengeance of the Empire, accepts this mission with a dark solemnity, apologizing to her father for past failures but steeling herself for the task ahead. She vows, with a chilling intensity that manifests in her narrowed eyes, that as a woman of the Empire of Phaeton, she will ensure she captures Claire without fail. Meanwhile, in the kingdom of Valatinier, the atmosphere stands in stark contrast, filled with the warm, golden light of domestic intimacy and royal duty. Prince Aglia finds Claire in a moment of repose, noting that she has been working all day. He approaches the subject of their future with a gentle proposition, mentioning the northern regions where snow falls, specifically the kingdoms of Polynia and Wigrin. He declares that it is time for them to embark on their honeymoon. Claire, ever the pragmatist, hesitates, her mind still tethered to the logistical details of the exam system for the knight-in-chief and the educational facilities. Aglia counters her hesitation by explaining that he has already discussed a month-long tour of the northern countries with his father, framing it as both a diplomatic tour and a consolation prize for Claire. Claire reveals her own thwarted ambitions regarding the trip. She had originally conceived the idea of renting a boat from La Mousselou to venture out to sea. However, the Marquis de Glen flatly rejected the proposal, warning that the open ocean is a different world, far too dangerous for anyone but an expert fisherman. Aglia acknowledges the validity of the concern, noting that while the crown prince and his wife cannot be denied a honeymoon, the optics and budget must be considered. He admits that their budget aligns more realistically with a terrestrial journey to the north. Aglia looks at Claire with a mixture of affection and guilt, realizing that they have merely added more work to her plate. Claire, ever resilient, clenches her fists with determination and vows to find a way to make the trip more low-cost. She expresses hope that the trip will serve as an opportunity to deepen friendships with new countries, leveraging the fact that friendly relations previously forbidden by the Empire are now permitted. She argues that honeymooning isn't always a bad thing, but she is acutely aware of the need to economize. She reasons that even if one saves money on souvenirs, bringing back items that won't be appreciated is a waste, yet she cannot travel dressed inappropriately for her station. She acknowledges the pressure from the domestic aristocracy, whose displeasure has been aroused by recent budgetary practices, forcing them to cut costs wherever possible. Seeking a solution to this fiscal puzzle, Claire retreats to the warehouse district to consult with Gersh. She finds him amidst a flurry of activity, the warehouse bustling with workers and cargo. She calls out to him, asking to borrow his Nigerian wisdom. Gersh, immersed in his duties, deflects her initially, stating he is at work and will talk later. The realization strikes Claire that she has been taking her position in the palace too lightly, barging in without consideration for his schedule. She apologizes profusely, shrinking back as the warehouse workers whisper about her presence. The scene shifts to a corridor where Claire is intercepted by her maids. They scold her for going to the warehouse to see Gersh, warning her about the rumors that start among the servants. One maid, with a stern expression, asks if Claire thinks she can get by with such casual behavior. Claire, chastised, promises to stay in her room and keep quiet, realizing she must also apologize to Prince Aglia for the trouble she has caused Gersh and the staff. Later, Claire and Gersh confer regarding the souvenir dilemma. Claire admits she tried to make a list but struggled to find items that wouldn't drain the treasury. Gersh points out that she has completely overlooked a crucial detail, one she had forgotten until he reminded her. He explains that only the kingdom of Valatinir trades with two specific regions, Synapse and Dragonet. Gersh outlines the geography of commerce. Dragonet is the land of mines, while Synapse is the land of arts. He elucidates that the trade routes are the most efficient way to procure jewelry, which serves as the ideal souvenir, easy to transport and fit into the budget. Claire grasps the logic immediately. She recalls hearing about Synapse's baby tiger, a reference to the jewelry or gems from the region, specifically the Dragonet tiger gem. Aglia reviews the plan and approves, agreeing it is a good idea. He notes that since the Nadir Shadow unit is accompanying them as escorts, they can afford to cut back slightly on other security measures. However, the conversation takes a personal turn. Aglia looks at Claire with a soft, somewhat pained expression. He compliments her curiosity but points out a disparity in her behavior. She barges into Gersh's office, but she never barges into his. He confesses, with a slight flush on his cheeks, that he is jealous. Claire is stunned by the admission. Internally, she grapples with the secret she holds. She knows that for Gersh, living proudly as a citizen of Nadir, his blood relation to her must be a burden. She realizes she cannot tell Prince Aglia the truth, that Gersh is her brother by blood. She fears that if it were revealed that the crown princess's brother is a mere warehouse worker or spy, it would hurt Gersh's pride and complicate Valatinir's treatment of him. Determined not to disappoint Aglia, who believes in her, she resolves to keep the secret. In a moment of intense devotion, Claire vows to spend her entire life with no man other than Prince Aglia. Aglia, moved by the atmosphere, leans in and kisses her, dismissing her fears with a gentle, "It's nothing." Preparations for the journey accelerate. Claire acknowledges Aglia's earlier point about safety and propriety, agreeing that she cannot go shopping without a single male escort. She requests the biggest, bulkiest bodyguard available. Lord Balk arranges for 2 armored guards, Gordon and John, to serve as her physical escorts. However, the key addition to the party is Elon from the General Affairs Department, who will serve as the negotiator. Elon is introduced, a slender man with glasses and long dark hair, dressed in the outfit of Sinn Féin. Aglia explains that although Elon is a former foreigner, he is well-versed and fluent in the language. Claire recognizes the attire immediately. Sinn Féin is a vassal state of the Fatenam Empire. Elon bows, his expression unreadable, stating he is not very good at negotiating but will do his best. Claire senses a distinct coldness from him. He blatantly turns his eyes away from her, and she intuits that he does not like her. Despite her misgivings, she accepts his help. The group departs, with the guards riding alongside the carriage on horseback. Inside the carriage, the tension is palpable. Claire sits opposite Elon, feeling the weight of his silence. She confronts the situation internally, realizing Lord Balk likely assigned Elon precisely because he knew Elon didn't think well of her, perhaps to keep proceedings strictly professional or to test her. She decides to address the friction later, resolving to nail it down once they reach Sinn Féin territory. Elon breaks his silence only to issue a stern warning. If she skips work and fails to produce results, he will report her to Lord Balk. The party arrives in the kingdom of Dragonet, a land of rugged terrain and stark architecture. They enter a negotiation with a local merchant, a man with wavy hair and a goatee who exudes an air of dismissive arrogance. The merchant apologizes insincerely, stating that while he appreciates them coming all the way out there, he cannot allow the item in question to leave the country because it is very valuable. Claire attempts to thank him for his time, trying to maintain diplomatic grace. The merchant continues his refusal, asserting that he has no doubt others would be willing to do business, but for the finest works of art, things money can't buy, he must ensure the quality of the precious gems, gold, or silver. He claims it is only natural that he should check them personally. As the tension rises, Elon interjects, apologizing for the trouble and serving tea to the merchant. Claire observes the tea service closely. She notes the tea cakes are mooncakes from Sinn Féin, paired with long or shin-fine tea. However, she recognizes a subtle, calculated insult in the timing. Serving tea immediately after the greeting, rather than after business is concluded or during a natural break, is a deliberate breach of hospitality protocol intended to save face while signaling dismissal. The merchant's demeanor hardens. He implies that transactions and contracts are essentially a man's job. When Claire attempts to assert herself, the merchant snaps at her, barking, "You stay out of this, you little girl." The tension of negotiation hangs in the air, softened only by the presence of delicate refreshments. Randy Bogwarts, a man of significant stature with flowing hair and a beard, offers an olive branch in the form of an apology, acknowledging that his previous demeanor had been a test of character. He presents mooncakes and shin-fine tea, items that carry the weight of nostalgia for his companion, Thun. The keen observation regarding the mooncakes, specifically their age based on aroma, demonstrates a level of discernment that hints at the intricate history between the goods and the merchant. Randy admits that negotiations are typically not the domain of women in his view, yet he concedes to the prowess displayed by the crown princess, labeling her a knowledgeable individual worthy of respect. He formally introduces himself as the Marquis of Bogwarts, the figurehead controlling all commerce within the kingdom of Dragonet, thereby shifting the dynamic from a mere merchant interaction to a high-level diplomatic exchange. Princess Claire, maintaining her regal composure, accepts the tea, finding solace in its scent which she likens to the green tea she frequently consumed in the Empire. This sensory detail bridges her past with the present, grounding her amidst the political maneuvering. Randy, having shed his facade, invites her to relax and select her preferred items from the treasures he is about to unveil, signaling the commencement of the true business at hand. He acknowledges her apology for his testing methods with a grace that suggests the matter is settled, allowing the atmosphere to pivot toward the allure of gemstones. The presentation of the jewels begins, not merely as a transaction, but as an exhibition of rare beauty and geological history. Randy unveils the first stone, a sapphire of such magnitude and clarity that it commands immediate reverence. He describes it as the Deep Sea, a name bestowed upon it for its sheer size and the purity that allows it to shine with an intensity proportional to the light it absorbs. Claire observes the gem, her eyes widening at a spectacle she admits she has never encountered before. The stone is too massive for standard decoration, transcending jewelry to become an object of pure admiration. Randy notes the human tendency to be captivated by such jewelry, the desire to possess and cherish it simply for its existence. Moving to the second piece, Randy presents a stone known as phosphophyllite, poetically titled, Eternal Early Summer. He elucidates the immense difficulty in processing this gem due to its low hardness, making a specimen of this size a statistical anomaly and a treasure of immense rarity. Claire is drawn to its color, comparing it to the scent of young leaves and the refreshing sensation of cool candy, a synesthetic appreciation that underscores the stone's unique appeal. Randy warns of the challenges in crafting such a stone, yet expresses confidence that artisans would eagerly embrace the challenge for the honor of working with such material. The third stone introduced is a pink diamond, referred to as Spring. Randy classifies it as the rarest of the collection in terms of both color and dimension, describing its hue as flower-like and sweet. This gem represents the pinnacle of standard jewelry items, yet it stands apart due to its exceptional qualities. The narrative weaves through these descriptions, painting a picture of wealth and natural wonder that leaves the princess visibly enchanted. Finally, Randy reveals the fourth stone, a red spinel named the Flame. He explains its provenance as a sibling stone to the Deep Sea, mined from the same location at the same time. The sight of this fiery red gem triggers a visceral reaction in Claire. The color reminds her intensely of the eyes of Lord Aglia, causing a flush to rise to her cheeks and a hesitation to settle in her heart. She grapples with the emotional weight of the stone, feeling that selecting a gem that evokes such personal memories of Master Aglia might be inappropriate given the context of negotiating with Synapse. Despite this internal conflict, she resolves to acquire 2 jewels from the selection. However, the selection process hits a snag when a specific, sacred stone is mentioned, the Imperial Topaz, known as the Light of the Sun. Randy explains its religious significance, representing the national belief in the god of the mountain and the god of fire. It is an ancient and precious stone, unparalleled in purity and size. It is at this juncture that Elon, the quiet observer from Sinn Féin, interjects with a proposal that shifts the paradigm of the meeting. He offers to converse with the stones, a concept that baffles the uninitiated but stems from his background as a priest's son trained in the shrine of the Blue Dragon. Elon requests permission to touch the stone, promising no harm, and Claire, recognizing his origins and the potential validity of his skills, grants it. She identifies his connection to the Blue Dragon, one of the 4 deities worshipped in Sinn Féin, located in the dragon's veins across the cardinal directions. Elon confirms his ability to perform feats similar to the priests of Dragonet, establishing a cross-cultural theological link. He prepares to engage with the mineral consciousness, removing his glove to establish direct contact. The narrative plunges into the abstract visualization of Elon's technique. He describes the process as connecting neural circuitry, a mental discipline required to decipher the Or language. To Claire, it appears as a spell or secret code, but to Elon, it is a perilous negotiation with a sentient force. He likens the experience to approaching a wild horse with an unknown temperament. One must get close enough to communicate without getting kicked, obtain permission, and then guide the entity. The mental strain is evident, and Elon admits to the exhaustion that follows such a profound connection. He confirms the intent of the stone, translating its voiceless vibrations into comprehensible desires. Claire watches this metaphysical interaction with a mix of awe and understanding, admitting that while she does not ride horses, she grasps the essence of his metaphor. Elon, regaining his composure, notes that skilled craftsmen likely perform this listening unconsciously. The conversation then drifts toward theology. Elon questions Claire's stance on religion, noting that the Vietnamese Empire historically held an unwritten rule of non-interference with the religions of other nations. Claire affirms this, stating that all religions must be respected equally, a diplomatic stance that contrasts with the corruption Elon implies exists within certain priesthoods. The result of Elon's communion is revealed. The deep sea sapphire expressed a desire not to be separated from its sibling stone, the flame. Consequently, the original plan to return with spring and eternal early summer is abandoned in favor of respecting the stone's will. Randy and Claire conclude the transaction, with Claire expressing gratitude for the wonderful experience and the beautiful stones, and mentioning a desire to visit the Temple of the Dragonet in the future. The scene shifts to the return journey. The carriage rolls back toward Valentinier, carrying the precious cargo and the weary travelers. Inside the confined space, the tension between Claire and Elon remains palpable. Claire attempts to bridge the gap, asking about the theological connection between the blue dragon of the four gods and the sun god of the Dragonet kingdom. Elon, however, deflects the question, suggesting she wouldn't understand and proposing to explain it only after they return. His refusal to engage in small talk and his generally cold demeanor weigh heavily on Claire. Back in the safety of her quarters, Claire decompresses with her maid, recounting the exhausting nature of the trip. She laments the wall she feels between herself and Elon, attributing his coldness to her origins in the Empire, which Sinn Féin historically opposes. She describes the stinging sensation of his gaze, comparing the stress to the rigid daily dinners and meetings she endured in the Vietnam Empire. Her confidant, however, offers a different interpretation, suggesting that perhaps Elon's behavior stems from jealousy rather than hatred. Claire dismisses this, convinced simply that he dislikes her, yet she acknowledges that he performs his duties competently. The chapter closes with the maid gently massaging Claire's arm, urging her to vent her frustrations, as Claire admits she has been complaining to Prince Aglia about the difficult bureaucrat. The intricate dance of diplomacy, commerce, and hidden emotions leaves the princess weary, holding onto the precious stones that now carry both the weight of their cost and the memories of their acquisition. The atmosphere in the royalty room is thick with unspoken tension, a heavy silence that hangs over the porcelain cups and delicate pastries. Princess Claire, her brow furrowed in deep contemplation, breaks the stillness by voicing the anxieties that plague her mind regarding the bureaucrat from Sinn Féin. She questions whether the man is harboring deep-seated frustrations or complex, negative feelings toward her, a suspicion that casts a shadow over her recent diplomatic successes. Across the table, Sir Balk, her steadfast protector and advisor since her arrival in this foreign land, listens with the stoic patience of a seasoned knight. Claire postulates that Elon might be jealous of her, a theory born from the palpable friction in their interactions. Balk, however, remains skeptical of this interpretation. He tilts his head, his expression betraying a hint of discomfort as he admits he would not classify Elon's behavior as jealousy. He suggests that the reality of the situation is far more intricate than simple envy, hinting at layers of cultural and political nuance that Claire has yet to decipher. Balk explains that his recent preoccupation with restructuring the Duke's affairs has prevented him from spending significant time with Elon, leaving a gap in his intelligence regarding the man's true motives. Recognizing the futility of speculation, Claire decides to cut to the chase. She resolves that the only path to understanding is a direct confrontation, determining that they must ask Elon himself to unravel the mystery of his disdain. The narrative shifts to the following day, finding Claire standing before the imposing door of Elon's office. She has come with a specific intellectual purpose, intending to inquire about the theological identification of the blue dragon of the four gods with the sun god of the Dragonet kingdom, a topic that bridges their respective cultures. However, upon her entry, Elon preempts her questions with a cold, administrative efficiency. He presents her with a stack of dense, intimidating documents, instructing her to read the transcribed scriptures before they exchange even a single word. Claire stares at the pile of books, the sheer volume of the text daunting, yet she accepts the challenge with a quiet, "Okay then." Elon, turning his back to her to resume his work at his desk, issues a stern ultimatum. He does not require her feedback or understanding, only her patience. He warns her that if she voices any denial or disagreement during this process, he will erase the conversation from existence, pretending it never occurred. He buries himself in his work, leaving Claire to navigate the labyrinth of religious text alone, instructing her to notify him only when she has finished. Time dilates within the confines of the office. Claire commits herself to the task, putting aside her personal feelings and the earlier suspicions of jealousy to immerse herself in the 4 divine religions. She acknowledges the physical and mental toll of the endeavor, noting that reading 6 dense books is not a feat accomplished in a single day. 2 full days pass in this scholarly pursuit. Claire realizes that this is a test of character. Sir Balk would never place his trust in a man incapable of such diligence, and Elon is treating her with the rigorous expectation he would apply to his own duties. She silently affirms her resolve, determining that even if Elon dislikes her, she will not renege on her word. When the task is finally complete, the dialogue shifts to the theological substance of the texts. Elon explains the methodology of his faith, describing how they observe the movements of celestial bodies to determine good days and bad days, interpreting these sequences as direct signs from God. He clarifies that the scriptures refer to celestial bodies and stars as a collective whole, forming a systematic study of the universe. The scriptures of the 4 gods posit that a deity resides in each of the cardinal directions, east, west, south, and north, while the earth, the center of human existence, sits at the convergence of these divine points. Elon continues his lecture, explaining how the priesthood combines the movements of these heavenly bodies with the geographical locations of archaeological sites and precious stone mines. By integrating local traditions with these observations, they identify locations where power accumulates. This geo-spiritual mapping provides the foundation for the syncretism Claire inquired about. It is why the blue dragon of the 4 gods and the sun god of Dragonet are considered one and the same entity. He elaborates that Surayu, represented by the single character for dragon, corresponds to the planet Jupiter, which is viewed as a pseudo-sun in their astronomical theology. Claire, having absorbed the material, offers her analysis. She notes that some celestial bodies are described as having opposing affinities. She deduces that if Elon were not the priest of the Blue Dragon, Master Randy would never have entrusted him with the precious stone in the first place. She marvels at the concept, wondering if this spiritual connection allows the priest to understand or sense the language of powerful gems and natural objects. She recalls reading that during a priest's baptism, a holy piece, a relic, is implanted into their forehead, a physical merging of man and sacred stone. She realizes that without this connection, the stones might not even permit them to touch them. Elon observes her with a critical eye, noting that she treats these phenomena as miracles of God. Claire, however, frames her understanding differently. She views the scriptures as a scholarly text and the 4 deities as a systematic field of study rather than a purely religious dogma, which allowed her to grasp the concepts with relative ease. She expresses a genuine respect for the system, stating that while she will not join the faith, she does not deny it and finds it objectively impressive. She clarifies she is not a candidate for priesthood, but she recognizes the profound connection priests receive, words from nature itself. Elon admits that it typically takes a prospective priest 5 years of rigorous training to reach the level of understanding Claire has demonstrated in mere days. He gazes at her, impressed, while Claire deflects the praise, insisting that he is the truly amazing one. The moment of intellectual connection is shattered by a sudden, visceral reaction from Elon. He clenches his fist on the desk, his face twisting into an expression of disgust that catches Claire off guard. She recoils, interpreting his reaction as a confirmation of his deep-seated dislike for her. However, Elon clarifies that his revulsion is not directed at Her Royal Highness personally. He reveals the source of his anguish, memories from his childhood, specifically the words of Emperor Phaeton during the conquest of Shinfine. The narrative plunges into a dark flashback, dominated by the imposing, cruel visage of Emperor Phaeton. The Emperor's words echo with tyrannical dismissal, "Only if you serve my country." He declares, "I do not deny your God, nor do I acknowledge him, for it is but a trifle." The Emperor's philosophy is one of absolute pragmatism and spiritual erasure, stating that it does not matter where a subject's heart lies, provided they serve the empire. Elon explains that while the Emperor feigned a stance of tolerance toward the Shinfine religion, in reality he treated it as if it did not exist, erasing their cultural identity through indifference. Claire listens to this revelation, the pieces of the puzzle falling into place. She realizes that Elon's coldness was never about her, but about the institution she represents. She apologizes for forcing him to relive such painful memories and explain himself. In a moment of vulnerability and solidarity, Claire aligns herself with him, stating, "Just like me." She confesses that she does not hold any love for the Empire or her father, severing the ideological tie between herself and the tyrant in Elon's eyes. Sensing an opening, Claire presses for one final piece of information regarding the 4 divine churches. Elon agrees but imposes a condition. She must listen to his musings without replying, a method of imparting forbidden knowledge without officially doing so. He prophesies that she will be sought out by a different branch of faith. He warns that her upcoming honeymoon will be intense, driven by factors rooted in faith. He reveals that this threat shares the same roots as her homeland, the Phaeton Empire. Claire descends the stairs, processing Elon's cryptic warning. She understands that his words were a form of foreknowledge derived from the scriptures, a prediction of the dangers that lie ahead. She realizes she needs to know more about the destination of their honeymoon, the kingdom of Wigrin. Elon's warning about religion in the 2 countries implies a volatile situation. The scene shifts to a clandestine meeting with Gersh, the shadow escort. He confirms Claire's suspicions about the neighboring kingdom of Perania and the religious undertones of the region. The conversation turns to Lenaism, the state religion of the Phaeton Empire, founded on the worship of the goddess Lena, the creator of all things who returned to the sea yet continues to support the world. However, the critical issue lies in the kingdom of Wigrin, where the Lena religion is also the state religion. Gersh explains that the introduction of Lenaism to Wigrin occurred alongside the introduction of the empire long ago. The problem, he notes, is that while the clergy in the empire have altered the scriptures to suit their political purposes, the fundamentals in Wigrin have remained stagnant, preserved exactly as they were taught in the earliest, most barbaric days. Because Valatinir was a vassal state, no books or updated doctrines ever made it north to correct these practices. Claire asks what the core problem is, and Gersh's answer is chilling: they offer life. He describes a ceremony that has long been abandoned in the civilized empire but persists in the fundamentalist enclave of Wigrin. He reveals that the faithful in Wigrin believe they must give the blood of God as proof of their belief. Claire demands clarity, and the horrifying truth is laid bare. Every year, the illegitimate son of the king, possessing at least 1 drop of imperial blood, is sacrificed. The imagery accompanying this revelation is stark, a silhouette of an infant surrounded by blood spatter. Claire is horrified by the notion that having a royal child equates to a death sentence in this culture. Gersh explains that this atrocity is a closely guarded secret, known only to the royal family, the pope, and a few high-ranking nobles. The fanaticism is so deep that even the mothers, the wives of the king's illegitimate children, sometimes claim they are happy to dedicate their child to God. The cult in Wigrin is actively looking for the thicker blood of goddess Lena to sacrifice, making Claire a prime target. Claire realizes the gravity of the trap. She has already received a letter of welcome from Wigrin. She knows that if Lord Aglia had known about this barbarism, he never would have chosen it as a travel destination. She implores Gersh not to tell Lord Aglia, fearing his worry and knowing they are past the point of turning back. Gersh, flanked by Elon who has joined the conspiracy of protection, assures her that they will be her bodyguards. He identifies his group as the Nadir of Shadows, promising to keep her safe so she can enjoy her time there, while advising her to forget the gruesome story he just told. Claire, internalizing the horror, realizes she may become a victim again, just as she was in the Empire. Later, Claire speaks with a young man, seemingly unaware of the dark undercurrents, who mentions he was able to live his life without anyone noticing him, likely an illegitimate child who escaped the purge. Claire maintains her composure on the surface, but internally she is terrified. Since hearing Gersh's story, her sighing has become frequent, a physical manifestation of her dread. A maid approaches Claire, asking for a moment of her time. It is Elon, now fully committed to the role of protector. He informs Claire that he has already consulted with Lord Balk and is prepared to leave the castle to be part of her escort. Claire, shocked by his initiative, asks why he is doing this. Elon, his expression serious behind his glasses, remarks that it would have been fine if she remained ignorant, but now that she knows the truth about the leaves and branches that hunt her, he cannot stand idly by. He confirms that he knows exactly what awaits them in the peaceful-looking fields of Valatinir and beyond. In the final scene, a carriage rolls toward the mysterious and dangerous territory of Wigrin. Inside, a woman in an ornate hat and veil speaks to her companion. She asks if the scenery is nostalgic. The companion, revealed to be Claire's sister Bianca alongside Millie, Claire's former lady-in-waiting, replies with a sharp, "No way." Bianca looks out at the big, provincial state with disdain, declaring she does not want to go through the again. She instructs Millie that she must do her job as best she can when they arrive in Wigrin, setting the stage for a collision between the sisters in a land of blood and fanaticism. A flashback begins as Il-yen expresses the necessity of having someone capable of handling otherworldly beings beyond human comprehension. Drawing on his devotion to the four gods' faith and its sacred words, Il-yen notes how Claire has grown fearful after learning about the local religion. Claire appears visibly distressed and sweating as she struggles to process the weight of the situation. With a steady gaze, Il-yen reassures Claire that he does not dislike her enough to ever abandon her to death. Overcome with emotion, Claire weeps as she realizes there are truths she was better off not knowing, despite her belief that knowledge equaled safety. Il-yen promises to protect her without fail, acknowledging that her sincere understanding of their faith is why she is welcomed in this country. In a moment of vulnerability, Il-yen admits that a woman's tears and fears are his greatest weakness while offering her a handkerchief. The scene shifts to a conversation about the upcoming visit, with a woman praising Lurias for his excellent work handling the wedding gifts. As preparations for tomorrow's departure conclude, they marvel at rare treasures like the Synapse Brillante egg and diamond rock glasses that even Phanom could not obtain. Excitement builds for the journey ahead as they anticipate meeting Lord Agria. A character notices a lingering sense of unease despite the outward expressions of anticipation. Lord Agria urges Claire to be completely transparent with him, insisting that she never hide anything important. Agria explains that while he has learned to smile through any grief or anger, his smiles for Claire are different and deeply personal. He leans in closer, speaking softly to her as the atmosphere becomes more intimate. Declaring that he only wants her to keep smiling, Agria asks Claire to share all her burdens with him. Claire asks him to wait a moment, revealing that she secretly bought something in the castle town while traveling incognito. She nervously presents a gift to Lord Agria, admitting she had been putting off this moment for some time. Embarrassed, Claire shows him matching pendants with stones reflecting their eye colors, hoping they can trade and carry them for each other. Agria is deeply moved by the wonderful gesture, believing the pendants will serve as a perfect charm for their upcoming trip. Claire stands before Lord Agria, her heart full as she prepares to make a significant request. Looking him directly in the eyes, she asks with a blush if he will carry the burden along with her. Recalling their marriage vows, Agria confirms that as husband and wife, they must uphold the promises they made to one another. The shared moment of silence emphasizes the gravity of their lifelong commitment. The narrative reflects on the core of their bond, the duty to support and trust one another unconditionally. Agria gently explains that without her trust, he cannot properly protect or support her, pleading for her to believe in him. Claire realizes that if she truly wants help, she must find the strength to voice those words aloud. Steeling her resolve, Claire looks at Agria and promises to finally tell him everything. She reflects on her own folly, realizing that Agria is the one person she should have trusted most of all. Agria patiently assures her to take her time, promising to listen whenever she is truly ready to speak. The king and a young girl bid them farewell, warning Agria that travel is always full of surprises while telling Claire to take care. The queen emphasizes the diplomatic importance of this honeymoon, now that trade is free, and reminds Agria to protect Claire properly. Vowing that his sword will shine sharper than ever to protect his wife, Agria credits his rigorous training under Lord Bulk. With a wink, Agria playfully suggests that he might be the one relying on Claire when it comes to the political side of things. Claire enthusiastically declares she will give this mission her absolute all as they prepare for the journey. After a 5-day trek across the kingdom of Bartonia, they plan to stay in a border town before entering Polinia's capital. Claire is fascinated by the shift in scenery, noting that the trees in this region are mostly broadleaf rather than the faster-growing conifers. Her excitement peaks when she spots grazing cattle along the horizon during their approach. They finally arrive at the location where they will be spending the night. Agria is impressed by the construction techniques, noting that using tough, costly broadleaf wood for buildings and furniture requires immense skill. Claire teases Agria about his curiosity rubbing off on her, leading to a light-hearted moment of laughter between the two. Agria admits that while his curiosity is fun, it can also be exhausting to maintain. He expresses deep happiness that he no longer has to pursue his interests alone and now has someone to share them with. The narrative moves forward to the following morning as they continue their diplomatic mission. The Crown Prince and Princess of Bartonia receive a formal and respectful welcome upon their arrival. Agria expresses gratitude to His Majesty of Polnia for taking the time to welcome them during their honeymoon. The Polonian king notes how the world is changing, inviting them to greet their god, something previously undreamed of for foreigners. Though they follow no specific faith, Agria respectfully asks if the Polonian god would still look kindly upon them. The king welcomes them warmly, suggesting that praying for a safe journey would bring them good fortune. Agria offers their gifts as sacred offerings, inviting the king to use them as he sees fit for the nation. The king is honored by their thoughtfulness and personally offers to guide them through the sacred grounds. As they walk, they listen to stories of Polonian architecture before arriving at a strange and unfamiliar sight. Claire is surprised to see a torii, a traditional gate that stands without any doors. The guide explains that the torii serves as a spiritual entrance, leading the way toward the first shrine. He describes the path leading past several shrines to the main dwelling of their god, Hayaten no Kiko. The king explains that the ritual is not strict, requiring only a simple bow and pressing one's hands together. He describes the prayer as a moment of personal dialogue with the divine within oneself. The narrative notes that unlike the twisted faith of the Phenatom Empire, Polinia's god is deeply woven into the people's true culture. The guide encourages them to take their time with their prayers as he waits nearby. The group approaches the shrine with a sense of quiet reverence and respect. The intricate details of the shrine's entrance are revealed as they prepare to offer their prayers. Agria, Claire, and their companion close their eyes and join their hands in a silent, collective prayer. Agria reflects on the honor of greeting Hayaton no Kiko in person during this pivotal journey. He prays for a safe return and asks the deity to watch over Claire and all those traveling with them. Claire feels a deep longing to understand Polinia's spiritual culture as deeply as she once wished to understand the four gods' faith. Suddenly, a look of shock crosses Claire's face as something unexpected occurs during the prayer. Agria calls out Claire's name in alarm as a strange phenomenon begins to unfold around them. An intense light or energy reacts to their presence, startling everyone at the shrine. Claire cries out for Lord Agria as the supernatural occurrence intensifies. The onlookers watch in stunned silence as the divine blessing manifests in a visible way. The king and the travelers are left in absolute awe, struggling to comprehend the incredible sight before them. The energy crackles and pulses as the divine interaction reaches its peak. Characters struggle to find words to describe the miraculous event they are witnessing. The king asks if they are wearing anything unusual, as Agria notes they only have ordinary pearl and ruby pieces. He realizes that this must be a direct and extraordinary blessing from Hayaton no Miko-sama. The king interprets this as a divine sign, believing the goddess has granted them protection for their safe journey. He explains the symbolism of their gems, where the ruby represents the sun and the pearl reflects its light like the moon. The king emphasizes that what has occurred is truly extraordinary and beyond normal explanation. He concludes that God listened to them because they came with sincere hearts rather than selfish desires. Agria respectfully accepts the divine gift with humility and gratitude. Claire agrees that the explanation makes perfect sense as she recovers from the shock of the blessing. The couple shares a quiet moment, their bond strengthened by the shared supernatural experience. With the religious ceremony concluded, the king cheerfully asks if they are ready to proceed with their sightseeing plans. He enthusiastically encourages them to enjoy the beauty of his kingdom to the fullest. The king admits he had braced himself for warmongers but is relieved to find them possessed of a noble and liberal spirit. The journey continues with a newfound sense of mutual respect and divine favor. Agria grants the group permission to tour the country freely, promising a guide to accompany them throughout their journey. Leading them to the wardrobe chamber, the host suggests changing into local attire to avoid the restrictive nature of Bartonian clothing. Claire is deeply moved by the thoughtfulness of the offer, acknowledging the kindness shown to her party. Sensing the opportunity to blend in, the party agrees to Agria's suggestion to change their outfits for the upcoming travels. Claire decides to accept the local dress to avoid standing out, noting that wearing what fits the land is a wise choice. The group is split by gender, with the crown princess being led one way while the gentlemen are directed elsewhere. Overwhelmed by the incredible variety of patterns and colors, Claire finds herself unsure of what would suit her best. Feeling hopeless regarding fashion, a blushing Claire asks the attendant for help to ensure she doesn't embarrass Agria-sama. The attendant, Nigel, introduces herself in Polynesian and is surprised to find that the crown princess speaks the language fluently. Nigel confidently takes charge of the styling process while Claire politely thanks her for the assistance. Nigel praises Lady Claire's fair skin and white features, remarking that her presence is as elegant as a pearl. Explaining Polynesian symbolism, Nigel notes that the sun and mountains represent men, while Claire reflects on her habit of always wearing blue. After Nigel confirms blue suits her perfectly, Claire expresses a desire to try something different for this adventure. Nigel explains that the moon, rivers, and watersides are the traditional symbols used to represent women in their culture. Assuring Claire that the choice won't be outrageous, Nigel encourages her to view the wardrobe change as an adventure. Nigel holds up various garments, carefully selecting the pieces that will redefine Claire's appearance for the tour. Dressed in their new Polynesian gear, Agria and Ilyen wait patiently for Claire to reveal her new look. Claire emerges wearing a stunning dark ensemble and a traditional face veil, looking absolutely radiant in the local style. Agria is momentarily stunned, realizing as her husband that he should have been the first to compliment her beauty. Anxious and blushing behind her veil, Claire hesitantly asks Agria if he truly thinks the new outfit suits her. Looking at her with soft, adoring eyes, Agria assures Claire that the attire suits her perfectly. Agria playfully declares he must keep his arm around her to stop anyone else in this foreign land from falling for her. Claire smiles at his protectiveness, noting that her husband remains as jealous as ever. The couple shares a tender moment together, fully embraced in their new cultural surroundings. The attendants, Gwenna and Melissa, approach and marvel at how stunning Lady Claire looks in her finished outfit. Reunited in their Polynesian veils, the women exchange excited greetings as they prepare to head out. Claire is equally impressed by her attendants, telling them both how beautiful they look in their new clothes. The group wonders if they can buy the outfits to take home, though they worry there might be no occasion for them in Bartonia. Dazzled by the vibrant colors, Claire reflects on the history of the land and feels a surge of excitement. She makes a mental note to purchase a history book from a local bookstore before they conclude their visit. The group gathers in a grand hall characterized by large circular windows and intricate traditional architecture. A court official named Dullahan introduces himself, set to serve as their guide for the duration of their stay. Dullahan invites the royals and their attendants to take a carriage into the heart of the city. Agria requests to be called by his name rather than his title to avoid drawing unwanted attention in town. Claire follows suit, asking the guide to simply call her by her name as well. Dullahan offers a curt nod of understanding, his golden eyes fixed on the royal pair. A horse-drawn carriage carries the group through the streets of a city filled with traditional wooden buildings. The party reaches the city quickly as Dullahan answers their various questions regarding Polynesian architecture and climate. As they disembark, the group prepares to explore the vibrant urban landscape of Polynesia. Claire is startled when Agria suddenly takes over as the coachman and offers to carry all the luggage. Watching the prince work, the others decide it is best not to ask how he ended up in that role. Dullahan explains the religious layout of the land, noting that branch shrines for their god are scattered throughout the country. He describes how visitors at these shrines can pray, purchase protective charms, or draw omikuji. Claire repeats the word omikuji, intrigued by the unfamiliar term and the practice it represents. Dullahan explains that omikuji are divine messages meant to serve as guidance for one's future life. Finding the idea of divine fortune-telling wonderful, Claire exclaims that the practice sounds like fun. Dullahan asks if she would like to try drawing one, and Claire enthusiastically agrees to the experience. Before the fun begins, Dullahan insists they first pay their respects to Hayaten no Miko-sama. The entire party lines up before the sanctuary, following local customs to offer their silent prayers. Claire receives a fragrant amulet, noting with delight that the charm smells wonderful. Dullahan explains that the pleasant scent comes from the fragrant wood stored inside the small pouch. Claire admires the elegant patterns and the beautiful embroidery work on the sacred pouch. The party lingers at the shrine, surrounded by traditional torii gates and the peaceful atmosphere of the sanctuary. Deep in thought, a member of the party sits beneath the trees, contemplating the spiritual nature of their visit. Examining her fortune, Claire marvels at how smooth the paper feels and wonders about the process used to make it. Dullahan offers to read the message for her, but Claire wonders what the divine words could possibly reveal. Claire decides to have Ilian translate her fortune instead, wanting to share the moment with her companion. The attendants look at their own fortunes, reacting with a mix of joy and nervous apprehension. Claire stares intently at the paper in her hands, bracing herself for the message regarding her fate. The omikuji is revealed as a powerful divine message that can reveal fortunes both auspicious and ill. The message delivers a chilling prophecy: the journey will bring turmoil, and a flaw lies in the bloodline. Haunted by the words, Claire can only hope that nothing strange or dangerous comes of this prophecy. The phrase, "a flaw lies in the bloodline," echoes in her mind as she struggles to understand its hidden meaning. Shadows of doubt begin to cloud Claire's thoughts as the weight of the divine message settles over her. To lighten the mood, it is announced that their next stop is a sweet shop to sample Polynesian treats. The narrative transitions into chapter as the group moves toward the next phase of their tour. Claire asks if they can split up briefly, as she is eager to find a bookstore to learn more about Polynesia. Agria refuses to let her go alone, though he acknowledges how typical it is for her to seek out books. Claire urges Agria to enjoy the sweets without her and promises he can tell her all about them tonight. Agria relents with a sigh, deciding that he will accompany her to the bookstore himself. A radiant smile breaks across Claire's face as she thanks him, relieved to have his support for her errand. Agria accepts the plan with a blush, his protectiveness toward Claire remaining front and center. Agria pulls Claire close for a tender embrace, whispering for her to be careful even with the guards present. The group sets off through the city streets, moving between the traditional shops and buildings. Claire speaks privately with Garsh, checking if he has been monitoring the Phenatom Empire's movements. She confirms the importance of tracking their rivals, her mind shifting toward political concerns. Despite the bustling city around her, the ominous fortune continues to weigh heavily on Claire's spirit. She admits to Garsh that the omikuji message about a flaw in the bloodline has been on her mind since the shrine. In the bookstore, Claire asks if there is any news concerning her elder brother or her sisters. Garsh mentions a rumor that Princess Bianca has been skipping social events due to poor health. Claire finds this impossible, knowing Bianca would normally hide any illness behind a bewitching smile and makeup. She fears that unless it is a truly serious illness, something is deeply wrong with her sister's situation. Claire grips her clothing in distress, realizing she should have been informed if the situation was genuinely critical. She worries there is a secret afoot that even the legendary shadow Nesia couldn't see through. Sensing a looming threat, a trembling Claire tells Garsh they must hurry because she has a terrible feeling about this. Dullahan immediately dispatches his men to investigate the Empire while Lord Agria prepares for the next phase of their journey. Agria assures the couple that results will be ready soon, and Claire expresses her deep trust as they prepare to depart. Lord Agria suggests they finish their errands by purchasing the books Claire wanted before returning to their home base. Claire softly agrees to the plan, her expression hidden behind her mask as she prepares for the final legs of their trip. The scene shifts to a serene view of the traditional wooden architecture and stone pathways surrounding the estate. Agria reflects on his decision to have the shadow Nesia investigate the Empire following the troubling omen from the Amikuji. Despite a lingering sense of dread, Claire finds comfort in Lord Agria's presence, which makes her burden feel lighter. The following day, the group tours Polonian farms and workshops, marveling at the region's historical wooden architecture. Claire is astonished to learn that the centuries-old structures are built entirely without the use of metal nails. Dullahan explains that wood is a shifting material that responds to moisture, necessitating unique and precise building techniques. Claire realizes that Polonian architecture requires remarkable skill and notices the absence of any written records or manuals. Dullahan reveals that master carpenters pass down their woodcraft and rooftop movement techniques solely through word of mouth. The specific surveying methods used for construction are guarded as a national secret and are never shared with outsiders. Claire finds it a shame that such vast knowledge is never documented, fearing the potential loss of these traditions. Agria praises the intricate craftsmanship of the furniture and pillars, hoping for a future diplomatic exchange of artisans. Dullahan warmly welcomes the idea of future migration, acknowledging that Polnia also has much to learn from Bartonia. Lord Agria promises to inform the king of these potential cultural and artisanal collaborations. Dullahan invites the couple back to the palace, where His Majesty is already waiting to host a farewell banquet. Claire asks Dullahan why he was chosen as their guide, noting that he does not appear to be a traditional noble. She prefaces her inquiry by apologizing for the potentially rude nature of questioning his status and background. Dullahan looks contemplative as he prepares to reveal the truth behind his unique role and appearance. He admits he expected the question sooner and expresses appreciation for Claire's polite consideration. Dullahan explains that his albinism and golden eyes are viewed as sacred in Polnia, making him an auspicious guide. Claire realizes the physical toll of his condition, noting that those with such traits are often vulnerable to the sun. Dullahan recounts a childhood of painful blisters, though he explains his resistance grew as his eyes turned gold. By wearing long sleeves during travel, he manages to navigate the sunlight without suffering any significant issues. Claire feels honored to learn about his personal history and the respectful way Polnia regards those with albinism. At the final banquet, the king theatrically laments their departure as they discuss deepening ties between their two nations. The moon hangs over the palace as the peaceful honeymoon in Polnia officially draws to its conclusion. Lord Agria asks Claire's opinion on giving Dullahan a special gift to show their gratitude for his service. Claire enthusiastically agrees, suggesting black leather gloves to aid Dullahan's skills as a master swordsman. Agria notes that leather goods are rare in Polnia, making the gift both practical and culturally unique. They decide to send the gift upon their return, recognizing that while Polnia excels in dyeing fabrics, leather is not widespread. Lord Agria teases Claire, suggesting that her trademark curiosity is starting to rub off on his own way of thinking. Claire playfully corrects him, stating that her desire to provide a useful gift isn't just curiosity. She defines her actions as true thoughtfulness rather than just a simple desire for knowledge. While curiosity is for oneself, Claire argues that applying knowledge to help others is the essence of being thoughtful. Claire smiles warmly at Lord Agria, noting that he has possessed this selfless quality long before she ever did. She reflects on how he has always protected her and made her smile since the very first day they met. Blushing, Claire confesses her immense happiness at having shared this honeymoon journey by his side. Agria looks at her with deep affection and confirms that he feels the exact same way. With their dawn departure looming, Agria gently takes Claire's hand and suggests they finally get some rest. The couple shares a tender moment as they bid each other goodnight, ready to face whatever comes next. The narrative shifts to the next day, noting their original plan to rest in Bartonia before visiting Wigrin. Political pressure forces a change in plans when the king of Wigrin sends an escort to bring them directly to him. Agria finds the sudden rush suspicious, as their itinerary was already known, signaling potential trouble ahead. While resting at an inn during the journey, the group is interrupted by a sudden arrival. Garsh arrives unexpectedly with shocking news, apologizing for the intrusion but emphasizing the gravity of the situation. Claire is visibly horrified when Garsh reveals the catastrophic news. Princess Bianca has gone missing. The team realizes they were so focused on the Empire's agents that they failed to watch Bianca closely enough. Garsh admits he failed to anticipate her disappearance and apologizes for letting his guard down. Knowing Bianca always moves in spectacular ways, Agria decides they must share this development with everyone immediately. The chapter title, When Two Rays of Light Converge, appears as the investigation into Bianca's whereabouts begins. The group discusses the impossibility of Bianca being married off secretly, as she is nowhere to be found in the Empire. Agria wonders if the Empire has a hidden agenda now that they are under financial pressure to buy back grain. The strain on the Imperial Treasury suggests a desperate move is coming, and Agria is determined to find its meaning. Claire posits that the Empire may try to destroy Bartonia again, potentially targeting her during the honeymoon. She fears being used as a sacrifice while Bianca, who shares the same goddess blood, is positioned as a queen. The mystery deepens as they wonder how Bianca slipped through Bartonia to reach Wigrin without being caught. The group concludes that Bianca must have had a powerful collaborator helping her evade detection. They speculate that either a high-level spy or a traitor within Bartonia itself facilitated her escape. Shadow Nizia continues to investigate whether Wigrin has already fallen under Bianca's secret control. Claire suspects that the messenger sent to extend their stay was actually part of Bianca's calculated plan. Agria warns that Bianca is the perfect lady, making it easy for her to manipulate others to her will. Garsh promises to report back as soon as he uncovers the truth about the King of Wigrin and the Pope. The group worries that Bianca is already married and reigning as the incarnation of the goddess in Wigrin. Claire laments the irony of their shared blood, where one is worshipped as a goddess and the other is a sacrifice. Garsh reminds Claire that Bianca is just a fox, exploiting the goddess Rhine, unlike Claire's genuine spirit. He praises Claire's true virtue, noting her devotion to others and the knowledge she built through her own effort. Garsh points out that any other princess would have been a mere sacrifice, but Claire has become so much more. He reminds her of her own words, "My country is Bartonia," and notes that many people share his high opinion of her. The memories of her allies flash by, proving that everyone who knows Claire recognizes her incredible devotion. Claire grips her dress tightly, steeling her resolve and vowing that she will not allow herself to die. The weight of Ilian's prophecy still haunts her, but it now fuels her determination to survive. She pledges to protect her own life with everything she has, knowing her kingdom's fate is tied to her own. Garsh looks on with fierce loyalty, swearing that he will never let anyone kill her. He reaffirms his bond to her, promising to protect her as her brother forever. A servant interrupts to announce that they will be arriving at the capital very soon. The atmosphere in the capital is described as tense, a sharp contrast to the apparent peace of the rest of Wigrin. The town's sturdy walls and dark feel remind Claire of the Fatinum Empire, despite the lively streets. She wonders if the government provides any relief for the poor, or if the luxury is only for the elite. The stark gap between the rich and poor is a grim reminder of the inequality Claire witnessed in the Empire. The memory of tasteless food and priests with forked tongues, flattering her father fills her with disgust. Claire recalls a time when she felt worthless and had no right to speak up against such injustice. Lord Agria notices her distress and asks if she is feeling unwell as they approach their destination. Claire and Lord Agria share a moment of tense realization in the carriage as they arrive at their destination. Masking her true feelings with a strained smile, Claire claims she was merely lost in thought about the city of Fatinum. Agria remains skeptical, noting that the city's forced sturdiness lacks the refined craftsmanship of the Empire. Claire observes Lord Agria's piercing gaze as he assesses their surroundings. He remarks that the city feels like a hollow shell hiding something beneath, earning Claire's quiet admiration for his sharp honesty. Ilian and Faye vow to always protect Lady Claire, though a sudden outburst suggests a chaotic shift in energy. Reflecting on her new environment, Claire realizes how much things have changed since leaving the Empire. Overwhelmed by the support of those around her, Claire resolves to stay strong and keep smiling no matter what. Agria offers a comforting promise to hide Claire's true feelings if she ever finds herself unable to smile. A sudden, adorable disruption occurs in the carriage as Lord Agria's flirtatious behavior flusters a protesting Claire. Claire ponders her identity as the living scholar, realizing the difficulty of defeating the persona of a perfect lady shaped by etiquette. The party is informed that the king is waiting, and Claire prepares to resist whatever challenges lie ahead with all her might. Led toward the throne hall rather than a reception room, Claire questions why they are being guided so formally. As they walk, Claire confirms her suspicion that Bianca is present despite the lack of proof, sensing a deliberate attempt to look down on them. Every detail of the decor and flowers is tailored specifically to Bianca's tastes, heightening Claire's anxiety. Lord Agria offers a steadying presence as they prepare to face the royal audience. The group enters the grand throne room where the king of Bartonia bids the crown prince and princess to raise their heads. The king offers a heartfelt welcome while apologizing for cutting their journey short. A chorus of applause rings out through the hall as the formal introduction concludes. Claire and Agria thank the king for receiving them during their honeymoon. The couple presents a gift box containing treasures brought specifically for the monarch. The king is astonished by the magnificent jewels from Synapse, accepting the treasures with visible excitement. Noting his recent marriage, the king expresses his delight that his new wife will be pleased by such gifts. Claire and Agria offer their congratulations, wishing for the prosperity of the kingdom of Wigrin and a happy marriage. The king commands his wife to come forth, preparing to introduce her to the royal guests from Bartonia. Claire recognizes the haughty high heels instantly, confirming her fear that the woman is indeed Bianca. The king introduces Bianca, the queen of Wigrin and Claire's elder sister, suggesting they share tea during the stay. Claire is shocked to see Millie standing right behind Bianca, wondering why she is there. Bianca greets the crown prince with a charming smile, further unsettling Claire and her party. In a tense reunion, Bianca addresses Claire directly, noting that it has been quite a while since they last met. Bianca sardonically returns the congratulations on Claire's own marriage with a sharp, knowing look. Claire is left reeling, questioning the presence of the lone flower in such a dangerous place. Agria maintains his composure, bowing and offering renewed congratulations to the beautiful queen of Wigrin. The atmosphere remains thick with unspoken tension as the formal greetings continue. Bianca thanks them for their well wishes and encourages them to enjoy their honeymoon. She accepts the gift with a backhanded comment, claiming she will put the fine jewels to good use. Excusing themselves from the king's presence, the party prepares to withdraw from the throne room. Claire feels a heavy sense of danger, fearing for her life in this hostile environment. She laments that staying in this country feels utterly devoid of joy. Duke Train Werg introduces himself, announcing that he has been appointed as their guide within the kingdom. Claire expresses shock at her sister's sudden marriage, while Agria politely accepts Lord Werg's guidance. Duke Werg explains that the kingdom's faith makes it difficult for even a sister to speak casually to the queen. He details that the marriage to a bride from the holy seat of Faenum is a national event recognized by the Pope. Werg promises a grand wedding celebration in the future, to which the royal couple will certainly be invited. Claire notes that Werg stays polite on the surface but seems more focused on cold politics than religion. The group arrives at the east wing of the palace, which has been granted for their exclusive use during their stay. Werg informs them of the dining arrangements and instructs Claire to notify him whenever she wishes to go out. After the Duke leaves, the group finally stands alone in their new quarters, exhausted by the day's events. Agria suggests having some tea to ease the tension, and a maid rushes to prepare it immediately. Il-yen suspiciously inspects the provided pastries, checking them for poison before allowing anyone to eat. He claims poison resistance is part of his training, much to the surprise of his companions. The tea is served, providing a momentary reprieve for the stressed royal couple. Silence falls over the room as Claire continues to process the day's revelations. Claire expresses her deep shock at seeing Millie serving Bianca. Agria asks for clarification on Millie's identity, as he is unfamiliar with the name. Claire explains that Millie was once her own maid but was revealed to be an assassin from the Empire. Despite sparing her life and sending her back, Claire is baffled as to why Millie is now by Bianca's side. Il-yen questions Millie's skills as a guard, while Claire wonders if the girl sought freedom through Bianca. The group discusses the specialized combat training maids undergo to protect high-ranking brides. Claire recounts Millie's tragic past, losing her noble parents to war and harboring resentment toward Bartonia. The weight of the political history between the two states hangs heavy in the air. Il-yen is outraged by Claire's empathy, finding it preposterous to forgive the Emperor's disloyal tool. He asks Claire if she has sugar candies in her brain for being so soft-hearted toward an enemy. Claire reflects on her privileged life as the third princess while others suffered the horrors of war. She maintains that she cannot hate Millie, earning a sharp warning from Il-yen to watch her tongue. Agria pivots to strategy, asking how they should conduct themselves if Bianca invites them to tea. Claire acknowledges that such a meeting is exactly when things will become truly dangerous. Agria suggests packing their schedule with sightseeing to avoid the Queen's invitations without causing offense. They realize this plan requires Duke Werg's cooperation to leave the capital as soon as possible. Garsh suddenly appears, startling the couple and advising against their current plan. He warns that things have become troublesome and insists they refrain from going out for sightseeing. Garsh stands firm, ready to deliver a serious explanation for his warning. Claire and Agria look on in surprise at Garsh's sudden intervention. Claire asks for the reasoning behind such a strict restriction on their movement. Garsh explains that the open countryside beyond the capital makes it impossible to protect them discreetly. Claire admits the truth in his assessment of the terrain. Garsh reveals the true danger, Lord Werg is allied with Queen Bianca, not the king, and is targeting Claire. He warns Claire not to approach Werg carelessly or give him any openings. Garsh describes the king and Werg as fools driven by emotion and fanatic devotion to the goddess Rhine. He bluntly adds that the Pope is a complete fanatic, making the entire leadership dangerous. Garsh recalls the warnings he gave before the trip regarding the kingdom's dark practices. He reveals that the royal family and high nobles truly practice sacrifice rituals. Garsh notes that the king currently has no illegitimate children to use for these rituals. He explains that Lord Werg's wife is resting after a birth and other nobles lack eligible daughters. The terrifying reality settles in. Claire and Bianca, both of the blood of Rhine, have arrived just as the kingdom needs a sacrifice. Lord Agria reveals that the date for the sacrifice ritual has been finalized for the day after tomorrow. Rushing the group to the capital was a calculated move, leaving the young man shocked by the immediate timeline. Lord Agria reflects on the church's strategy, noting that Queen Bianca might have been the victim if her existence hadn't been kept secret. He warns that Bianca intends to flee after the deed is done, but the country's religious fanaticism makes any escape nearly impossible. The grim plan is laid bare. Claire will be offered as a sacrifice to claim a divine blessing during the king's splendid wedding. Focusing on the true mastermind, the young man asks Agria to explain Lord Werg's ultimate goal. Lord Werg, the king's ambitious and highly trusted uncle, has already aligned himself with the schemes of Fennetom and the Empire. With a cold and certain gaze, the objective is revealed. Lord Werg intends to ignite a full-scale war. Agria urges Claire to remain confined to her chambers under the guise of travel exhaustion to ensure her safety. Trembling with fear, Claire realizes that war only brings suffering and finds herself paralyzed by the looming conflict. The weight of the world settles on Claire's shoulders as she realizes her death would be the spark that starts the war. No longer willing to accept her fate, Claire declares her desire to live for the sake of those who would grieve for her. Lord Agria takes Claire's hands, offering his unwavering strength and a solemn vow to protect her at all costs. He encourages her to trust her own heart and decide her own path, empowering her to do what she believes is right. Surrounded by her loyal allies, Claire finds comfort in the realization that she is no longer fighting this battle alone. Her resolve hardens into a fierce determination to protect her friends just as they have protected her. Claire analyzes the forces moving against her: Wigren's ritual, the Empire's religious manipulation, and the push for war with Bartonia. With a sharp, predatory look in her eyes, Claire silently vows that she will not let their dark plans succeed. The story transitions as Claire prepares to take charge of her destiny in the face of the upcoming ritual. Claire commands the attention of everyone in the room, preparing to outline her plan of action. She announces her intention to feign a total collapse from the exhaustion of their long journey and forced marches. Melissa and Gwenna will handle all her needs, allowing Claire to insist on eating only the food they personally prepare. Claire asks Garsh if he can use his versatile outfit to infiltrate the palace by posing as one of Lord Werg's men. Addressing her as the crown princess, Garsh confidently accepts the mission. Garsh pledges his total obedience, promising to remain silent and only answer to Claire during his infiltration. Turning to her next ally, Claire prepares to give instructions to Ilyen. Knowing it may be painful, she asks Ilyen to gather every possible record on the faith of Rhine so she can find a way to avoid the ritual. Ilyen bows respectfully, agreeing to fulfill the princess's request regardless of his personal feelings. A moment of quiet reflection follows as the weight of the plan settles over the group. The allies stand ready, their hands joined in a silent pact of loyalty and determination. Lord Agria looks at Claire with a gentle smile, asking what her specific command is for him. Blushing and looking up at him, Claire begins to make a deeply personal request. With total sincerity, she asks Lord Agria to never leave her and to always stay by her side. Agria moves closer, his expression softening as he acknowledges and accepts her heartfelt plea. In a tender moment, he promises to always be there to protect her, standing firmly by her side. The air clears after the emotional exchange, and the group prepares for the task ahead. Claire addresses the entire group one last time, signaling that it is time to begin their secret mission. The allies stand unified, each one ready to play their part in the dangerous game to follow. With a bold declaration, Claire officially launches Operation Shut-In to stop the ritual. Her companions react with a mix of amusement and bewilderment at the eccentric name she chose for the mission. Despite the light moment, the gravity of their situation remains clear as they prepare to hide. Holed up in their assigned wing, the group remains vigilant while Shadow Naija infiltrators watch the palace from the darkness. Using her illness as a cover to sleep during the day, Claire spends her nights studying the materials Ilyen smuggled in. Garsh successfully blends into the palace hierarchy, easily posing as one of Lord Werg's personal attendants. While being served tea, Claire admits to Garsh that she has always been curious about his unique skills. She marvels at his ability to pass strict screenings and blend in anywhere, even among Werg's elite men. Claire confesses that she simply doesn't understand the secret behind his perfect disguises. Agria adds that while Garsh once used official merchant guild channels to pose as a laborer, his current feat is far more impressive. They both press Garsh to reveal the trick behind his uncanny talent for infiltration. Claire stares at him with wide, expectant eyes, wondering if it's a secret he simply cannot share. Sighing at the pressure, Garsh admits he can't refuse a request from the top priority of Shadow Nyjah herself. He explains that Shadow Nyjah has always operated anonymously across borders, serving a very specific clientele. Their clients are exclusively high-ranking individuals, a fact Claire vaguely recalls but still finds puzzling. Claire points out that royal families usually have their own trained spies and assassins for such work. Garsh smiles, confirming that her observation is entirely correct. Claire listens intently as Garsh prepares to delve deeper into the nature of their work. He reveals they are often hired for a king's private bedroom affairs when the master's identity must remain a total secret. Garsh poses a rhetorical question, asking when a client would find it too risky to use their own known agents. Their specialty is slipping into night banquets to spread just enough whispers to reach the right ears. If two houses have conflicting orders, they simply serve whoever pays better, a system Agria finds remarkably clever. While requests in this kingdom have been rare, Garsh notes that his connections and the pride of nobles have kept them busy. Claire admits this is the kind of secret that can never be spoken aloud, while Agria feels he has learned a great deal. As the conversation ends, the group prepares to transition back to their roles in the operation. Garsh takes his leave, warning them not to push themselves too hard and noting that his long presence might become suspicious. The door closes quietly as the infiltration plan continues in the shadows. Agria stays with Claire while she sleeps, later deciding to rest himself once Gwenna takes over the watch. They exchange tender goodnight wishes, with Agria reminding Claire to rest properly as well. Claire's research reveals that sacrifice rituals are always held at midnight, yet no document discloses their secret location. The lack of movement from Wigrin to lure her out makes Claire incredibly uneasy as she remains hidden with her guardians. As dawn approaches, Claire is urged to sleep so she can be ready for the ritual scheduled for the coming midnight. Claire struggles to find sleep, knowing she must be mentally sharp when the fateful time finally arrives. The palace remains silent and imposing under the light of the rising sun. Melissa wakes Claire as evening falls, informing her that the day has passed into twilight. Claire immediately asks if anything notable occurred while she was asleep. Melissa reports that despite the ritual being tonight, the palace remains surprisingly calm and quiet. Claire decides to wash up while Gwenna finishes preparing their dinner. Lord Agria enters the room, and he and Claire exchange morning greetings as they prepare for the long night. They discuss the ritual. Agria is certain it will be at midnight, but the location remains a complete mystery. Agria ponders the situation, his expression grim as the deadline approaches. He suggests they discuss their final strategy together over the dinner Gwenna is preparing. The tension in the room is palpable as the final hours before the ritual begin to tick away. The guards report that everything is quiet, and so far, no suspicious activity has been detected. Agria asks Melissa if anyone has been seen loitering near their wing of the palace. Gwenna knocks and announces that dinner is ready, but she suddenly realizes Claire is nowhere to be seen. Agria becomes concerned, noting that even Garsh found no secret diagrams or hidden passages in this part of the palace. Melissa explains that Claire has been in the washroom for a long time, leading Agria to fear she might be feeling unwell. Agria immediately sends Melissa to check on the princess. Melissa knocks urgently on the door, calling out to Claire and asking if she needs help. Panicked, Melissa shouts for Lord Agria as she discovers the room is empty. Agria stares in horror at the empty room, realizing with a shock that Lady Claire has vanished.